Good afternoon. Welcome to the August 24th meeting of the Lincoln City Council. Let us all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a period of silent meditation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll start with our Mayor's Award of Excellence, and then I'll read my stuff after you're done.
Oh, all right. Give me a head start here.
There you go.
Okay, huh?
We aim to please.
This time around, it's two police officers that we want to honor with the Mayor's Award of Excellence. They team up with each other up in the northeast district of the city, Councilman Lamb. And as I describe what they do, you'll understand why you should keep your distance from them a little bit. Both have worked for the city since about 2012, and they're being nominated in the category of productivity by their fellow police officer, Luke Bonkowitz, for the work that they do on their patrol, what they did on their patrol last year. Joseph Coleman, Kiefer Highland, two-person unit, rode in the same cruiser all year. Because LPD tracks virtually every patrol activity, it's possible to compare the team's performance to the average officer. In 2014, the average officer wrote 224 traffic warnings and 201 traffic citations. Officers Coleman and Highland wrote 541 warnings and 775 official citations. Their efforts were not limited to traffic enforcement. While the average officer made 26 warrant arrests in 2014, Coleman and Highland hunted down 67 warrants. The unit also excelled in criminal investigations. In 2014, the average officer made 111 misdemeanor arrests and 13 felony arrests. Coleman and Highland made 525 misdemeanor arrests and 60 felony arrests. Equally impressive, prosecutors filed charges on 9 out of 10 of their arrests, a 90% prosecution rate, which is very high. Officer Bonkowitz writes that this reflects a substantial command of criminal law and department procedures, as well as diligent investigating and excellent documentation. Numbers do not tell always the whole story, but Bonkowitz wrote that in this case, the numbers precisely reflect the officer's high levels of ambition and diligence and professionalism. The comparisons, quite frankly, he said, are staggering. As further proof of their productivity, consider that LPD patrol activity data goes back to 1996. This is only the second time since then that an officer or a two-officer unit has achieved at least 500 warnings, 500 official citations, 500 misdemeanor arrests, 50 warrant arrest and 50 felony arrest. Bonkowitz writes, Officers Coleman and Highland's year was not simply phenomenal, it was indeed historic. So it's my pleasure to present them both with the Mayor's Award of Excellence for July. They didn't say so, but I assume they were reluctant to be here today because they probably missed out on 6 arrests and 4 warrants and a bunch of warnings. So please help me in congratulating these officers for their very, very fine work. I think their boss has something he would like to say. Jim?
Thank you, Mayor, for recognizing these two fine officers. They are very hard worker officers. They've been on the department going on 3 years here. Both come on the same recruit class and stuff. We're very proud of them. They come to work day in and day out, really wanting to do the best that they can. And obviously, by the numbers that you can tell, they're out there doing their job. So thank you very much for recognizing them.
Families, you're welcome to do so.
Sure, we can introduce. How about that? Want to come on up?
If you want to approach the microphone, we'll be
Yeah.
able to hear you better.
This is my wife, Anna Wishart. My mother, Carol Coleman's here as well.
This is my wife, Shannon.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Give them a couple minutes to clear out, and then we'll start the show. In accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted at the back of the chamber. The order of business of the City Council is as follows. The clerk will call the items listed on the agenda under public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk reads that item. The applicant and those in favor should speak first, then those opposed. The applicant may then make one short rebuttal. Each speaker should begin by stating name, address, and whether you're speaking in favor or in opposition to the item. Testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. After all public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions and items listed under third reading. On the second and last item, or meetings of the month, immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on an issue not on the agenda for that date nor planned for a future agenda. Will the clerk please call the first item of business?
Certainly. We would request those giving testimony to please clearly state your name and address and to sign in on the sign-in sheet laying on the podium. First item is our public hearing consent agenda, items 1 through 4.
Anyone wishing to speak on these items? Okay, next item.
To our public hearing liquor resolutions. Those giving testimony are asked to come forward, raise their right hand for the clerk to administer the oath. After the oath, witnesses shall state their names and addresses. Applicants or witnesses are not required to stay for the voting session. I'll call item 5, manager application of Christopher Murray for Wilderness Ridge Golf LLC, doing business as Wilderness Ridge Golf Course at 1800 Wilderness Woods Place. Hi. Would you raise your right hand?
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
All right. Tell us what we're doing here.
Just applying for our liquor license.
Okay. Questions?
Introduce himself.
Oh, yeah.
Chris Murray, excuse me. Do you want my address as well? It's
Please.
7707 Upton Gray Lane, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68512.
Questions? Cindy?
So Wilderness Ridge already has a liquor license, you're just applying to be the manager? is
Yes,
that right?
ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Okay, next item.
All right, next is item 6, manager application of Marky Bryce for Brothers Bar and Grill at 1339 O Street. Solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be.
Yes.
Thank you.
My name is Marky Bryce, 1339 O Street, and I'm here to get my manager's liquor license.
Okay, questions? Okay, thank you very much. Anyone wishing to speak on this item? Next item.
Next is item 7, manager application of Brittany Grady for the U-Stop 12 at 6801 Wildcat Drive. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be? Thank you.
My name is Brittany Grady. Address is 3070 Vine Street, Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm applying for the manager liquor license for U-Stop 12 at 6801 Wildcat.
Great. Questions? All right. Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Next item.
Next is item 8, manager application of Mark Eggert for Buffalo Wings and Rings at 350 Canopy Street, Suite 200. Raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you really believe it to be?
Yes.
Thank you.
My name is Mark Eggert. Address is 341 North 44th Street. I'm applying for a liquor license for Buffalo Wings and Rings. Manager.
All right. Questions? Cindy?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Eggert, have you completed the training now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Yeah, see, you have a few motor vehicle situations with some speeding tickets and then no valid registration. Any thoughts on that? I know we go back a couple years to 2012 on the most recent.
It was mostly speeding tickets, and at one time I was moving from Iowa to Nebraska, and so it was just the transfer of my registration. But that was cleared up immediately.
Stay out of Northeast Lincoln.
Right.
I guess I would add there were a couple other applicants where there were some speeding violations a while back, and I guess we do watch those things in the future of any type. We appreciate, especially in capacities as managers of licensed establishments, we appreciate being good, sound, law-abiding citizens. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions? All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Okay, next item.
Next is item 9, manager application of Michael Schmidt for the Old Pub at 420 South 11th Street. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
Yes.
Thank you.
My name is Mike Schmidt, 900 Lamplighter Lane, and I'm here to apply for the manager's license for the Old Pub.
Okay, questions? John?
Yeah, tell us a little bit about what you're going to be doing there.
I'm going to be taking over the operations of the business, and I was given the opportunity to buy in about 3 months ago. I've got 12 years of experience in the bar business, and it's been a dream of mine to be a business owner, so it's kind of worked out.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Next item.
Next is item 10, manager application of Gretchen Cooper for Coop's Corner at 4947 Holdridge Street. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
Do.
Thank you.
Gretchen Cooper, 542 Maple Street, Burr, Nebraska. And I'm applying for the manager's license.
All right, Cindy?
This used to be Randy's Grill and Chill, right? Okay, and so you did some training quite some time ago, didn't you?
I did training just last week, actually,
Oh,
or
okay.
2 weeks ago.
Okay, good. And so you, now, you and your husband are running the business, you have full ownership of the business, is that right? Great. Well, I'm gonna hate to see that sign go down, but.
Well, it's going to go down this week, but there'll be a new one. Right,
Okay.
shiny new.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Next item.
All right, next I'll call item 11, application of Warren's Bottle Shop for an upgrade from a Class DK to Class CK liquor license at 3402 A Street. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you.
Eric Baum, 3710 LaSalle Street in Lincoln, Nebraska. And we're here today to upgrade our liquor license from a DK to a CK.
All right, questions? All right, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Okay, next item.
All right, next I'll call items 12 and 13. They are the application of Boss's Pizza and Chicken for a Class A liquor license at 1000 Saunders Avenue and the related manager application of Jason Johnson. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm Jason Johnson with Boss Pizza and Chicken at 1000 Saunders Avenue. I'm applying for the manager's application as well as the liquor license for the location.
What's your address, Jason?
6140 Northwest 2nd Circle.
Thank you.
Any questions? Roy?
Before the meeting, Officer Schaefer communicated with me that you have not attended the manager's training.
No, I have scheduled for the September 10th class.
Okay. Other questions? John?
When would you anticipate taking over as manager?
I have been manager the entire time at the location.
We just don't have a liquor license yet, so he was scheduled for the August meeting, but they didn't have a August meeting.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item?
I'd like to ask Officer Schaefer a question on this.
Okay.
Officer Schaefer, could you give us your impression of what's going on here?
Yeah, Conan Schaefer, investigator with the Lincoln Police Department. It was my understanding that Mr. Johnson was going to attend the training on August, I can't remember exactly the date, but the August training for that management, and that's the roster that we had his name on. If he's indicating now that he's planning on going to the September training, then that's fine with me. I just had not received any notification from him, so there might have been some miscommunication.
John?
Yeah, yes, Investigator Schaefer. As a procedure, do you have concerns if we went ahead and approved Mr. Johnson today?
I do not have any concerns, no. Okay. No, it's the business has been in operation for some time with Mr. Johnson in place, and they're just adding the liquor license at this point.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Next item.
Is item 14, application of Zipline Brewing for a special designated license to cover an outdoor area measuring approximately 36 feet by 72 feet at 2100 Magnum Circle on September 4th from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Craig Ryer, Zipline Brewing Company, 1524 Skyline Drive. We're seeking an SDL for Friday, September 4th. We're having a new beer release party, and just wanted the parking lot next to our tap room for food truck for the convenience of our customers. So happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions? All right, thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Okay, next item.
All right, next I'll call items 15 and 16. They are the application of Myers Cork and Bottle for a special designated license to cover an outdoor area measuring approximately 40 feet by 120 feet at Tire Rack SCCA Solo Nationals Tent at Northwest 36th and West Mathis on September 6th from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m., and the application of the same for a special designated license to cover an outdoor area measuring approximately 60 feet by 140 feet and an indoor area measuring approximately 98 feet by 125 feet covering all 3 floors at the Lincoln Children's Museum at 1420 P Street on September 11th from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m.
Welcome.
My name is Kenneth Meyer, 1244 South Street, Lincoln, Nebraska. Here to answer any questions that you might have in regards to these 2 SDL applications.
Questions? Cindy?
Carl.
Carl.
Well, the obvious one concerns the Children's Museum. What can you tell us about that event?
Well, we're going to do our best to introduce them to the consumption that we... no, this is a fundraising event for the Children's Museum. Of course, it will not be attended by other than adults. And they're expecting a large crowd, so we wish them well, and I hope they do really well in their fundraising event.
Other questions? All right, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this item?
Next is item 17, application of Omaha Expo and Racing for a special designated license to cover 2 outdoor areas measuring approximately 45 feet by 80 feet and 17 feet by 70 feet at Lincoln Racecourse at 7055 South First Street on September 10th from 10 a.m. to 1 a.m.
Hi, I'm Christy Harris, 10416 Jefferson Circle, Omaha, Nebraska. And we're applying for the SDL, similar to what we've done before in the past for the breeders and the Derby and the Preakness. What we're doing is this is our live race, and so it's our required regulation, and we'll have that on September 10th. And we open an area out in the area closer to the track for people that can sit outside, and we'll have picnic tables and things for them to sit out and enjoy the weather and enjoy the race.
Okay, questions? All right. Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Okay, next item.
Mr. Chair, I would move approval of items 5 through 17.
By Roy. Discussion. Carl.
Yes, the one, which was it, John? Number 13? 13. Just pending completion of the training.
Okay.
For
You
Mr.
add that as an
Johnson.
amendment?
Okay.
Yeah, I would make that amendment.
Okay. Second by Roy. Any further discussion? John?
I'd just like to emphasize what I said on one of the applicants. There were a couple of manager applications that had some driving violations, primarily speeding tickets and all, and just encourage, none of them came to the level, obviously, that we wouldn't approve you as managers, but we really appreciate following the laws and making life a little easier for Lincoln Police Department. So, just word to the wise on that, please.
All right. Congratulations to all the new managers. We had quite a few of them this afternoon. All right, call the roll.
All right, this is on the amendment to number 13. Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge? Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb? Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Oh, I had moved approval of all of them. I think that had been meant to be
Yeah.
a friendly amendment, but go ahead and move for 5 through 17, then. So we vote on those, please.
Yeah, I think that's on the table. We'll vote on it.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb? Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next then are our public hearing resolutions. Item 18, authorizing the City of Lincoln's application to the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission for financial assistance from the Recreational Trails Program for renovating the Murdoch Trail from Tuesland Avenue to North 70th Street. No oath.
No, thank you. Sarah Hartzell, Parks and Recreation Department. I'm here today to talk to you about the Recreational Trails Program. It's a program that we've participated in for many years. It is funded through the Federal Highway Administration and administered by the Game and Parks Division or Department. Every year we come to you with a request for a resolution to indicate that we're going to participate in this program. This year's program or project that we're proposing is the renovation of the Murdoch Trail. This is a trail up in the northeast part of Lincoln. The segment that we're renovating, there we go, is from Tuesland Avenue to 70th Street. The section between 56th and Tuesland is being renovated also. It's just being renovated through a watershed management program. This will change a 8-foot limestone trail into a 10-foot wide paved trail, which will allow use by all users who wish to rollerblade, skateboard, any kind of wheeled vehicle that would be able to run on that. Now, it will also allow us to clean this trail off during inclement weather so we can scrape snow off of it. That's very difficult to do with the limestone. No bridges involved in this one, so it's just a straight paving, and of course we'll do all of the signage and crossings in between on those intersections. And so we're requesting a resolution that just allows us to apply. That's part of the application procedure.
Just to be clear for everybody out there, that's all-wheeled, non-motorized vehicles.
Correct, correct.
John.
Just to clarify, Ms. Hartzell, too, on this, you're applying for a grant from FHWA, the Federal Highway, for $423,000 of the total cost, so there's another $105,000 that would come out of the
That's
parks budget?
correct. $55,000 would come out of our major trail replacement, repair and replacement CIP budget, and the $50,000 remaining has been pledged by the GPTN, Great Plains Trails Network.
Okay, thanks to them, thank you. And a question I'd have tangentially, we do the trails, we do other types of projects for the cities, and it's great to get the grants up front. When you get to ongoing maintenance beyond this major renovation here or rehabilitation, where does the maintenance fall then? Is that totally on Parks and Rec?
It's a good question. Yes, it is. It is Parks and Rec's responsibility. We do mow 5 feet on each side of the trail during the growing season, of course, and then there's the snow removal. And the trails program, the recreational trails program, now does actually require that you submit a maintenance plan along with your, because they want to make sure too that these are going to be maintained. Typically, the concrete trails have a 40 to 50 year lifespan, so repair generally isn't a problem unless we get flooding like we did this year. But
you anticipated my next question.
yeah, and we do budget every year for repair and replacement on trails.
Is there any endowment with this particular section of the trail?
Not this particular one.
Okay. And going to the unfortunate May flooding we had, which disrupted a number of trails, what do you do in a situation like that?
Well, in that particular case, a lot of the repair projects that we're working through are with the cooperation of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which does a 75% match on repair projects. We've got several of them that we've already taken care of through our own funding, and we'll be looking at reimbursement on those, and others that are upcoming. The Jamaica North, for instance, is one that will be a major project.
Do you have an idea what the other 25% is that we're going to have to pay, an estimate of what the whole amount will be?
Sure. The 12.5% comes from the state emergency funding, and the other 12.5% would be local. And that'll be a combination probably of our repair and replacement CIP. We've already had several offers from different groups that would like to contribute to those replacement projects. So there are people out there that really want to see their trails back.
Do you have a dollar amount estimation?
I don't know. Possibly, if Lynn would have a dollar amount of total. Okay.
Even a guesstimate today, just for the benefit of people? Just
Yes.
$5 million, $1 million?
No, I think it'd be somewhere, 200 to 300,000 most likely.
Yeah, Lynn Johnson with Lincoln Parks and Recreation. Yeah, we can certainly provide that information because we have done an estimate on the repair on those projects at this point. The range is probably, as I think as Sarah said, someplace, the local share is someplace in that $100,000 to $300,000 range.
Okay, yeah, if you get us the better information. Thank you.
Cindy.
Yes, thank you for coming and testifying today. Okay, for Tuesland and North 70th, does this touch or go by the Anderson Library?
It will go nearby that, yes. I don't think it touches it.
Okay.
I think on here, doesn't it show the Anderson?
And I'm sorry, that map was really small. The streets were. 'Cause I tried to look.
It goes adjacent to Ballard Park.
Okay.
Kind of between Seward and Colfax. So I think Anderson is just a little bit north of that, isn't it?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Jane.
I just want to say thank you because I did the trail trek, and that was one section of the trail that was a little bit rough, and then you get back on the pavement, and then you can speed along. So it make a huge difference in connecting all the trails. And
it'll be a great addition to that neighborhood. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions?
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to this item? All right, next item.
Next is item 19, approving a contract agreement between the city and Transport Plus for the annual requirements for ADA-eligible transportation services for a 3-year term.
Good afternoon, Council. Bob Walla, Assistant Purchasing Agent. This is a multi-year contract for ADA transport services. Just to give you a little history, over the last 8 months, the city issued an RFQ, which is request for qualifications, trying to find what companies that were qualified to provide this type of services. And then working with StarTran, we broke that group down to the option that they selected. And from there, we waited a certain period of time to let the Public Service Commission look at the applications for 2 of the other providers. And unfortunately, they were not approved by the Public Service Commission. And therefore, we moved forward with the contract with Transport Plus, who was determined to be qualified. And also, through negotiations, we came up with the contract that we have. Any questions?
Right. My understanding that there were a number of concerns and complaints about the previous contract?
Yes, there's a person here from StarTran that could probably answer those questions a little better than I could.
Hello, Brian Priner, StarTran. Yes, we had a contract with Servant Cab, the current provider now and soon to be no longer. We had some issues with the current provider, but I will tell you that Mike Davis, transit manager, and staff were very, very diligent in meeting with them to address those issues on a monthly basis.
Have we had those kind of level of complaints previous to this last contract, to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
John.
2 questions, if I may. First, if you could address the old Transport Plus and the new Transport Plus and some of the changes there over the last several years. And then secondly, I noticed there was a total of about $1.7 million it said for this contract. Was that the basic 3 years, or did that include the 2 or 3 one-year options?
That's just the initial contract term, the 3 years.
Right. Okay. Yeah. In terms of the history of Transport Plus, yeah, it was run by 2 husband and wife organization. They have since quit the business and moved to greener pastures. It's taken over by a new firm. They have still some family from within Transport Plus who is operating the company now, and I don't see much changes in the transition. They're still, my understanding, a very well-run organization.
I know I've heard a lot of good compliments and some people very happy to have it returned to
Yes.
Transport.
Yes.
Other questions? Cindy?
Thank you. I too, with Mr. Christensen, I had some citizens reach out to me about the prior contract, and when you referred to met with them, I just want to clarify, were we talking that you met with the citizens or with the provider?
Servant Cab on a monthly basis, address any issues that come up.
And have you met with the citizens also that were concerned, or did you attend any of those citizen meetings?
I believe there was a citizen meeting organized by some individual. I don't think our transit manager attended that meeting. But any citizens are obviously welcome to provide comments to us, and we respond to them accordingly.
Did you attend any of the meeting?
I did not.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else wishing to speak to this item? Okay, next item.
All right, next is item 20, approving amendment number 1 to the contract for services between Cornhusker Place of Lincoln, Lancaster County, now known as the Bridge Behavioral Health, and the city to provide $200,000 to Bridge by September 15, 2015, to support the ongoing remodeling project of its facility located at 721 K Street.
Jeff Kirkpatrick, City Attorney. The contract that is before you is a one-time expense to assist used to be Cornhusker Detox, currently known as the Bridge, with a remodeling project. It was forced on them in part because they used to get their meals from the jail when the jail was across the street, basically, and now that the jail is no longer across the street, they had to do something else about providing meals for the people in protective custody. LPD takes the majority of their clients there. They also receive folks from the county sheriff, from the state patrol, and from campus security, UNL police, but the majority of who they deal with are LPD folks that we take there and they then assume custody of.
Questions for Jeff?
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to this item?
Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Wright. I live at 4830 Lansbury Lane. I'm speaking to you today as the president of the Bridges Board and also co-chair of the current capital campaign underway. I think all of you are aware of the tremendous services that are provided by the bridge, how well they do their job. If you haven't been there, everyone I talk to who goes there after their first time is amazed at the depth and the spectrum of services that they provide. So I won't elaborate on that, but what I would like to say is I had the privilege of being a police officer in the city for 27 years. I recently retired, and I can tell you that as an officer who worked downtown, an officer that worked the near side, when you pick somebody up and you have the responsibility to care for them, to get them to a safe place, you can imagine having to get them home, having to find somebody to care for them under the Civil Protective Custody statute or under the Emergency Protective Custody statutes. That can take a long time, and it can take a lot of bargaining, a lot of phone calls in order to get somebody to take care of someone who's in the city's care and has to be put somewhere safe. When I taught the subject at the State's Academy and talked to officers how to deal with people who have behavioral health issues and substance abuse issues, I'd give them my best guess at how to handle people like this. And then at the end of the lecture, I'd say, okay, everybody who works in Lancaster County, come over here and I'll tell you how we do it. And when officers across the state heard about the services that we have at Cornhusker Place, excuse me, the bridge now, they were amazed, and they almost said, that's cheating. You can imagine how fast the turnover is to get somebody who needs help to help. And the bridge actually acts as a force multiplier for the Lincoln Police Department. It creates more availability of officers. It creates officers for the community. So the more we can establish deeper services, a better breadth of services, we're creating more police services for the city as well. Also, I can tell you that when I started as a police officer, usually a person that we'd pick up and try and get to help was someone who was intoxicated. They'd had too much to drink. When we took someone into emergency protective custody, it was because they had a mental health issue. Today, it's very, very different. The people that we take, I used to be a police officer. The people that the police officers take into custody are quite often dealing with a very complex set of issues, behavioral illness with drugs on top. No one really knows what's going on these days. You all dealt with a K2 issue not too long ago, and you can imagine how scary that is. Most emergency protective custodies these days, maybe 10% when I started, were dual diagnosis, both mental health and substance dependence issues going on at the same time. Today, officers who take people into emergency protective custody are dealing with people with co-diagnoses going on about 80% of the time. It's a very complex minefield that officers deal with when they're trying to help people. And to have a place like the bridge available, I know it's not something you can put on the budget line, but you can imagine how much litigation is available, how much risk is at hand when officers are dealing with these people and they're looking for a safe place to put them. I think it's a great investment to get the bridge bigger and better and able to serve more people. It makes us safer as a city. I think it makes us a better city as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Carl?
Yes. Thank you, Captain. Thank you for your many years of service to the community and continued service in a different capacity.
You're welcome.
We're not really in the business of providing support for capital campaigns for all the different great organizations we have in this community, but the bridge seems to me kind of unique, and the public role that you serve actually kind of deputized for the city, if you will, and this effort. And so, as I understand it, and the changes to the building, a significant piece of that is in kind of the medical care area and oversight of those who have been brought in who are having mental health issues, withdrawal issues, all those kinds of things, and also some some kind of protection of identity issues there too. So can you talk a little bit about how this project will help in those areas for a safer place?
With the expansion of the building, there's just so much more dignity and effective service that can be given to people. You can imagine having someone into 5 or 10 days of sobriety, getting into some short-term or even long-term help, but having to pass through an area of the building where people have just been brought into civil protective custody who are still bleeding off that smell of alcohol. It can send people back into all kinds of trouble and really inhibit treatment. That's just one little example of how the new floor plan, the new delivery of services with different areas that are segregated, that are pulled apart, can really help make the services more efficient and just so much more respectful for the clients there.
Okay. And medical staff, nurses will have better visibility, as I understand it, of different
right.
rooms.
They'll be able to be right on top of those clients that I talked about who are so much at risk, rather than having to get to different parts of the building to check on them and then retreat to other parts. They'll be able to be right there with them.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Other questions? Cindy?
My understanding is that you're also expanding over at the bridge into some outpatient treatment. Is that right?
I think it's increased. I would leave it to others to explain the availability or the increased services there.
Okay. And the part of what the bridge does is offers evaluations on a sliding scale or a reduced scale to folks who need it for different, maybe legal reasons. Is that right?
Correct. Drug and alcohol evaluations. They're also provide a tremendous number of services to the county as well, with drug court, house arrest, things like that, with the community corrections program.
And we heard mention of the meals kind of being an impetus for this. There's going to be a kitchen area there.
Correct.
And I've heard that perhaps they're going to be offering some training for residents there as far as being able to get for food handler permits and so forth.
One of the biggest success stories I've ever heard come out of the bridge was a gentleman who ended up at another local nonprofit that provides meals for someone. That kind of training, that kind of service is very much something that the bridge can get their clients initiated into as they're moving through the programming at the bridge, and give them a big leg up as they come out to go somewhere else.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jane.
Well, Captain Wright, I just want to say thank you very much, and Phil Tegler back in the audience for this service. I know as a former county commissioner, it's an indispensable service for our city. Otherwise, these folks would end up in the county jail and at a greater cost to our taxpayers. The bridge is a safer place for them where they actually get some treatment and options and evaluation. So I just wanted to say thank you very much. And I know it's money well spent, and it allows the officers to do their job in other areas of our city. So thank you.
I agree. Thank you.
Other questions? All right. Thank you.
Phil Tegler, 3500 West Van Dorn here in Lincoln. I'm the director at the bridge. Councilman Lamb, I'll address your question about outpatient care. Part of what we want to do with the remodeling project is to create a space in our building where we can provide outpatient services. As in healthcare, the work that we do with behavioral health will one day expand more to outpatient care with changes in the Affordable Care Act, for example. And we know that there are services that we can expand that will provide better care for the clients that we serve. But today, we're in a building that's 107 years old, and it's really designed to be a big inpatient treatment facility. That's the way we've designed it. So we think with some reorientation of the spaces on our first floor, we can make it much more amenable, if you will, for clients and their families to come spend a part of a day or a day with us and then leave, and be much more efficient in that care, be able to provide services for more folks, and to do a better job at providing that care.
Thank you.
Roy.
Mr. Tegler, I know in our community we have a number of veterans who suffer from PTSD and substance abuse issues. And I was wondering if you could talk about those individuals and perhaps any relationship that you may have with the VA to work with them.
Councilman Christensen, we do a tremendous amount of service today for veterans that are referred to us for services. There are very few detoxification beds, for example, and not only in our community, but in southeast Nebraska. And so for clients that are identified that need those withdrawal services and that are veterans, the Veterans Administration will refer to us for those services. They'll ask us to then help provide guidance in helping those clients get to care. If it's outside of the veteran system, or if it's within their system, we'll coordinate with their case managers to provide that care. So that's a big part of what we do, and our estimates today are perhaps 50% of the clients that we see have some either more recent or past military experience that might be exacerbating their need for care. We have collaborations with the Veterans Administration, with about every other agency in the community that provides those services. And frankly, their needs are great enough that none of us can do that care by ourselves. And those collaborations really help us to provide more effective care.
Other questions? All right. Oh, Larry,
I was just
sorry.
going to say, a number of us had a chance to tour your facility, and I can see why you would pay great attention to the layout of your building, the 107-year-old building, because the Civil Protective Custody Services had a completely different feeling, had a completely different role than the more comfortable spaces you were trying to provide for your other clients. I mean, Civil Protective Custody looked like a space that could be hosed down as needed for those who've had the immediate drug and alcohol and problems. And so I can see why you would want to make sure that there's a clear separation for those needing that kind of important and potentially messy care versus those who need to be there for their longer stays and need a more a softer touch.
That's part of our guidance. Thank you. Yeah. Other questions?
Okay. All right.
Thanks
Thanks for the work you do. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this item? Okay, next item.
All right, next is item 21, approving a request to the City Performance Audit Committee pursuant to Chapter 4.66 of the Lincoln Municipal Code to conduct a department audit of the City of Lincoln Public Works and Utilities Department and Engineering Services to determine if there are efficiencies to be gained with respect to the planning and completion of streets and roads projects pursued and completed by said department.
Jeff Kirkpatrick, City Attorney. This resolution that is before you today is in line with the recent change you made in the performance or the audit committee chapter of the Lincoln Municipal Code. Among other things, it required that the City Council send at least one request for a specific audit by August 31st, and this would keep you in compliance with the code. It then goes to the audit committee to refine that and move forward with your audit request.
Questions? All right, thanks, Jeff. Anyone else wishing to speak to this item?
Caught me by surprise a little bit there, Chairman.
Sorry.
It's okay. Good afternoon, Chairman Fowlers, members of the council. My name is Kyle Fisher, 1128 Lincoln Mall. I'm here today on behalf of the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce. And really, my point in being here in front of you is really just some kudos. Kudos to the council for its quick work on turning around to audit, and kudos, quite frankly, to our Public Works Department for their willingness to, again, open the books and I think, in our director's words, prove to everyone that they're doing it the right way. The Chamber really greatly appreciates the efforts being made in this resolution to be good stewards of the roads dollars. And we really agree with the purpose of the audit, just to bring more clarity to the issue. The audit resolution as designed should give a clearer picture of where the roads dollars come from and where they're spent. The current look and design, and I think the big CIP booklet that you get, it'd probably be an understatement to say it can be cumbersome and maybe even to a lot of people unreadable in some of its fashions, to be able to properly see where the sources of funds are, where they're going. We think that this audit will help bring some clarity to that. And really, as I'm sure you all know, roads and infrastructure funding and the condition of our roads and our wheel tax, it's probably the number one or two issue that you all hear about when you're out in the community. It's number one or two issue right up there with workforce development that we hear about. So, your work here in this audit and your willingness to make this your first one, it doesn't go unnoticed, and it's very appreciated from the chamber and its 1,600 members. So thank you.
Questions for Kyle?
Kyle, the audit committee that will be receiving this, this recommendation from the council has a big job to do once it goes to that body, and that is to try and understand how to approach it, whether it's performance, it's financial, it's what kind of audit specifically. And while there is detail here, there's a lot. Do you have any priorities for that committee that you'd like to suggest to help focus their work?
Well, I think one of the things that we've always talked about, and I'll give kudos to Thomas Schaefer, an individual in Public Works, who is the gospel on a lot of this funding. Wheel tax can be confusing in the way by ordinance that it's broken down in its three functions. There's all sorts of different revenues that comes either from the federal government, the state government through gas tax. We split that up. I think, as you all know, very little these days, Mickey can correct me, I don't think any general fund dollars go into our actual road and street maintenance that we do. So we take these different sources of funds, wheel tax, gas tax, all those, and we break them down into somewhat of a confusing formula into how they're distributed, and then we put them into a CIP, and the document, again, you have to know what your sources of funds are and where they lie in this 50-page document or more. So if we can find a simpler way, if the audit committee can find a simpler way to say that we get $55 million in wheel tax funding each year. I don't know, rough estimate, $55 million in overall road funding. I can't remember what the exact number is. And we can match that up dollar for dollar in the projects where it was either spent or allocated. And at the end of the time, have a report at the end of the year as to what we finished and where the remaining dollars are spent. You had an appropriate or a transfer last week in this meeting of some $4.5 million between projects. Unless the public is down here and engaged and reads that agenda, they don't see that. And so they may think, well, I paid my wheel tax, but I can't see where it's going. And we think if this audit can find a clearer way to do that than forcing them to read through a CIP, that would be beneficial to everyone. So, I mean, I think that's step number one. I think step number two, as far as a priority, is to bring awareness to just how few dollars there are and how limited of funds there are, and maybe the antiquated ways that we break them down. For a long time, it was a question of how we did snow removal, and there were some wheel tax dollars in there, and we've kind of changed that around over the years because of some discussion about when somebody pays to license a vehicle, is that a general benefit to the property taxpayers in Nebraska that we get our snow removed, or is it simply on the people who register their vehicles? So exploring some of those avenues as to where the funding comes from and where it goes would also be a priority, I think, in our opinion.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right. Thank you, Kyle. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Okay, next item.
Do we have staff questions? Or?
You can do staff questions.
Mickey, can you come up?
Mickey Esposito, Director of Public Works and Utilities.
Thanks, Mickey.
Sure.
Again, just as I mentioned before Kyle spoke, the audit committee that receives this has a big job to do. You've agreed to participate in this audit process. Do you have any information you think this body needs to be aware of before we make our final recommendation to the audit committee? Is there any concerns, comments, or suggestions you have as we go down this path? Because this elected body will be making a recommendation to the audit committee. The audit committee will be taking that recommendation very seriously, but we won't have a chance necessarily to come back and try and clarify what this body was, intending. So can you elaborate on what you think will make this, and even respond to Kyle's comments if you'd like?
Sure. Thank you for that opportunity. I appreciate that. The first thing is, this is a great opportunity for us to talk about streets. And I know you hear a lot of it from the community, so do we. And how we deliver projects is really important to us, and we want to do that in the best way possible. So anytime we get a chance to talk about roads and street funding and financing, we will grab at that opportunity. So that's just our attitude about it. The second thing is we're pretty accustomed to audits, and our department goes through them a lot, actually financial performance or otherwise. So yeah, we're kind of good at it, and it tends to validate our processes, and we're happy to do that again with this audit committee. So those are the 2 points. But if I could talk about priorities that maybe you might look for in the process and challenge the audit committee to take a look at, I think you're going to have to find some special expertise in this field. And it's going to take a unique set of people to do this correctly. And I would just pay attention and be mindful of that, whether it's a civil engineering background or municipal project delivery that we're talking about. I think it'd be really good if the audit committee could be mindful of selecting those experts. Other than that, I'd love to be able to find efficiencies, if I could, in spending roads money. We feel like we've maximized efficiencies, but if there are other ways, we're open to hearing that through this audit.
Do you foresee any, there's a long list of information that's requested. Are there any problems providing that information, or is that information readily available?
We have some that is readily available, and I think because of the resolution, we'll hit the ground running right away and start working on gathering that information. We're not going to wait until this body assembles. That's just not like us. We're very type A. So we will start with assembling some information that is in the resolution itself, but it will take a lot of staff time. They always do, and hopefully out of that we have some gains. That's my hope. Or, in fact, it validates what we're doing today and what other municipalities do, and we're doing things just right. But I do appreciate, especially Kyle's remarks about, explaining the budget to people a little bit more if they want more of an explanation. We're happy to provide that.
Jane.
Mickey, what about the format of the information, how it's packaged? I think Kyle mentioned it's a little confusing trying to dig into it and dive into it and dissect it and figure out where the funding is and how it's being spent.
I think the CIP is a process that is complex for people. It's not something they can just pick up. And actually, we are getting ready to have a kind of a greater website presence on streets. I gave you a PowerPoint earlier, maybe a month and a half ago, that incorporates some of that $1 a day investment by citizens. And I think people really want to know, how much do I pay and what do I get? And, just like that's how I feel about any tax that I'm paying. How much do I pay and what do I get? And so we're working really hard and diligently on creating just an easier way to explain that to people.
John?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
As you see the charge here for the audit committee, do you see it also addressing with engineering services some of the design approaches that are used for streets and so forth?
I hear where you're coming from. You have an interest in sort of looking at design aspects. There are things we can do and things that we have to follow state and federal law on, and including our own municipal design standards. So we have some flexibility there, but I think that will come down to the expertise that you bring on in this process, and how much you want to spend on that type of expertise and that look. I mean, if I'm being completely honest, I don't recall the budget. I think it was about $60,000 for an audit review. Getting into some of those design components might exceed that amount to be, but we're welcome whatever the audit committee wants to look into and what this body drives. Sure, we can take a look at those things.
Go ahead. Go ahead. One of the items on here talks about sidewalks and how they're paid for, and we certainly want to see what all the different tax funds pay for, but to me the question of whether or not sidewalks is included raises a policy question. Do you see that as a policy question?
I do.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
I sure will. I've said over and over again that our transportation network consists of sidewalks and roads. We spend about 2% of the budget to sidewalks and dedicate it that way, and we think it's an important component of the transportation system. We want drivable streets, walkable sidewalks, and efficient traffic systems. So to us, it's just part and parcel to the whole transportation network, and we have taken that approach in dedicating about 2% of the budget to that.
You good?
I think so.
Other questions?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to this item? Okay.
Jane Kinsey with Watchdogs of Lincoln Government. Will this be available to the public so that they can also see it, or just to the council?
I think it's public document, so it will be available once it's completed to everybody. Yeah.
So the fine points that were audited will be presented, not just an overview.
The whole report from the auditor will be available to the public. It's a public document, will be available.
Where would they be able to find that?
Oh, we'll have to determine that. That's something we'll have to determine. Maybe we put up it on our website or include it in our packet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this item? All right, next item.
All right, next is item 22, Comp Plan Amendment 15002, amending the 2040 Lincoln Lancaster County Comp Plan to change the future land use map from unbuilt mixed-use office center to unbuilt neighborhood center on property generally located at the northwest corner of South 70th and Yankee Hill Road.
Good afternoon, members of the City Council. Danae Kalkowski. I'm appearing today on behalf of 1640 LLC and White LLC. They currently have an option to purchase the northwest corner of 70th and Yankee Hill Road. The application we have before you today is a request for an amendment to the comp plan. This request would change the comp plan designation from a mixed-use office center to a neighborhood center. I think the staff report does a pretty good job of kind of explaining why, but just a couple comments. This property's been shown as commercial in the comp plan since 2006. So really we're requesting just a change to the designation, which kind of further delineates it. And the real reason for the change is really due to market factors. The suburban market office over the last several years has been really soft. In fact, I think you've seen some applications come before you where we've been changing areas that were designated for office centers into alternative uses, some apartments and some other things. So I think this is just a recognition of the market change. And it's not that there won't be office in this center, it's probably just that the mix of office uses will be a little different. It may not be the primary use, it would be just some additional uses as part of the neighborhood center, which typically has a large mix of not only retail, service, but also office uses. This planning department recommended approval, unanimous approval at Planning Commission, and so we're asking for your approval also. But I'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Questions? Cindy?
Thank you. As I read the the Planning Commission's fact sheet, it appears that there was no testimony in opposition to this, correct?
Nope, I was the only testifier.
Okay. Well, that's always good to know.
That's always good news.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this item? Okay, staff questions? Next item.
All right, next is item 23, Special Permit 15041, application of E&G Enterprises LLC for an early childhood care facility for up to 125 children with a request to waive the conversion plan on property generally located at 8120 O Street.
Good afternoon. My name is Tim Gergen. I represent the developer for this early childhood care center. We've been through Planning Commission. We were approved unanimously on consent agenda for this project. We've worked with the neighbors throughout our design process and be happy to answer any questions you may have on this application.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The next, is there anyone who'd like to come forward and speak on this item? Any staff questions? Okay, I'll go to the next item.
All right, next is item 24, amending the 2014-16 City of Lincoln biennial operating budget for for the 2015-16 fiscal year.
This is Steve Hupka, City Finance Department. I'd just like to provide the viewers at home a little bit of an overview of what we've been doing. We're in the right at the midpoint, excuse me, of 2014-16 biennial budget. And we're ready to start our next fiscal year starting September 1st. A year ago, we adopted a budget for 2015-16, and we're about to that point right now. This resolution that's before you does several things, but it is not a new budget. It is amending the existing 2015-16 budget. Some of the things we're doing in here is we're shifting funds to where they're needed, and there's reappropriations, there's transfers in here. Some of this expending authority would expire if we didn't reappropriate it, so we're taking care of that. One of the main things we're doing is we're implementing final valuations into the budget, which obviously in 2014 we didn't have those available for the 2015-16 years, or 16 year. We're also adopting budgets for a couple of entities that do not do a biennial budget, the Community Health Endowment and Pinnacle Bank Arena, so that's in here. There's a few things that have been quite well publicized that we're adding funding for, fire trucks being one of the major ones. There's also a roof for the Municipal Services Center and some bus purchases for StarTran with funds from the university. Those are additional things. And then I'd like to point out that we've published the budget for 15-16 last year. The property tax rate is the same as it was a year ago. We're still with that rate that we're proposing, and we filed the information for the 2015-16 budget last August. It's been available for anybody to review for a year. And then we've also had meetings with council members individually. And we also had a pre-council last Monday to go over items in this resolution. So I think there's been a wealth of information out there regarding the things that are in this document. And we're here today to hear the public's testimony on these amendments and revisions.
Questions for Steve? Cindy?
Thank you. So you mentioned a couple of things. The couple of projects that you mentioned, what has been added to the 15-16 budget since the biennial budget was passed last year?
The fire equipment, which is $2.8 million, is being proposed. Part of that, about $636,000, is to be provided by the revaluations of property that were above and beyond what we initially built into the 15-16 budget. And then $2.1 million of lease purchase financing from certificates of participation, which are a form of bonding. Then also I think we have $200,000 in there from other funds as well.
And what else has been added to the 15-16?
A roof for the Municipal Services Center, which is in there for $2,500,000. And then once again, the buses for StarTran. Those are an additional item, and that is funding with a source of funding that isn't city funds. And then we have some transfers around at Serve Centennial Mall and the In-Street Bikeway as well.
And without these additions, the current revenues and backing out the excess valuation, without the excess valuation and without these additions, are the revenues from the city currently sufficient to meet the budget for 2015-2016?
Yes, they are. And again, I think as you said, they're without the additions and without the additional revenues, but those offset each other. The expenses and revenues equal one another.
Carl.
Yes, thank you. Steve, we obviously have to be prepared for things that are unknown. There are also some things that occur that are known. And we've got one of those coming up next year where it's a kind of a quirk of time and how we pay our salaries. But the 27th paycheck, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so that bill is on our desk, and we know we're going to have to pay it at some point next year.
It'll actually be in a 2016, 2017 budget.
Okay.
But we're in a real good position right now to be able to pay for that extra payroll with fund balances and not have to raise additional revenue for that one-time expense.
And approximately how much do you think that
When
might
I
be?
looked at that a couple of years ago, it was in the neighborhood of $3.5 million with benefits.
Thank you.
John.
Thank you, Mr. Hupka. And as we've gone through this, and you mentioned in your preliminary remarks, there was 600,000 plus that was excess funds due to the higher valuation the county assessor made on property. If that wasn't spent elsewhere, what happens to that? Or what are the possibilities of what can happen to that?
There'd be a couple possibilities. I mean, you could have that extra money go to fund balances, and the way you would do that is increase the property tax revenue in the budget and reduce the appropriation of fund balances.
And so where does that go, though? Is it just sit there in that unappropriated fund balances? Or?
It would be unappropriated in that first year, and then the following years you could appropriate the fund balances as a revenue source to the budget.
Since we got excess tax revenues, is another option to give it back to the taxpayers?
That's an option.
Any other options?
On something other than fire rigs, but that's an immediate need.
So basically spend it, put it in a reserve, or give it back to the taxpayers?
I'd say those are the three categories, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Jane.
Steve, Cara brought up the 27th paycheck, and you said it's roughly $3 million?
Well, probably 3.5.
$3.5 million. Then how is that reserve handled? So say that $630,000 from the evaluations that is was unanticipated. It's above what we had budgeted for of $500,000. So how is that carried forward into the next 2-year cycle? Or is it in the fund balance, or how is that
Well,
handled?
we would collect it as property tax revenue in the upcoming fiscal year, and if we hadn't appropriated that, it would go into fund balances, and then in the following fiscal year, we could spend it as fund balances as a source of funding.
So that's something that we have to plan for during this budget cycle? And
Yes.
it's already in the budget, a certain amount?
Well, no, not at this point, because that'll be the 16-18 biennial budget, but we get paid on September 1st, 2016, and August 31st, 2017. That includes city council members, too.
I'm just concerned that how are we going to be able to pay that bill when it comes due in the following?
Well, the good news is that the city's fund balances right now are in great shape, and this is a perfect use of fund balances. It's a one-time source and a one-time use.
Okay. Other questions? Larry.
Steve, we've just gone through this revaluation process with property, and it's tempting to view it as some sort of windfall that just has landed in our laps, but that's not necessarily how the city looks at it. Can you explain how you, as the finance director, approach planning for that revaluation, those numbers? Share with everyone the estimate you gave to council and when you gave us that estimate, and how close to the mark you actually got.
Well, when we built the current biennial budget, and specifically the 15-16 portion of it, we kind of based what we thought we would get off recent history. And so we estimated an additional 5%, and that was done back in probably June of 2014. And it came in at 6.2%, and that provides additional revenue with the existing tax levy. And one of the reasons the 15-16 budget went together relatively well was because we had that additional revenue.
And we get this, how many years is there between revaluations?
It's once every third year.
So it's in a way a kind of a growth dividend. It's a way of thinking about inflation, but it comes in one year at every 3 years.
It reflects in the inflationary value of property in the city.
Okay. And can you discuss a little bit about how quickly our revenues grow as a city versus the growth of the city?
Well, I think I know what our expenses grow, and it's pretty much like clockwork, between 3.5% and 4% if we don't add programming. And our sales tax might grow 4.5% in a good year. And aside from the revaluation years, property tax probably grows 1.5%. So it's with those two major sources as a total not making or keeping up with the rate of inflation and the expenses, the other revenue sources aren't big enough or do not grow fast enough to keep up with the budget. So, and that's going to be the case next year. When we do the 16-17 budget, I expect that we're going to have a gap to fill.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I think it's just, just a mathematical function is we're not going to have 5% or 6.2% growth in property tax. We'll probably be 1.5%. And sales tax will be lucky if we get 4.5%. But our expenses will go up 3.5% or 4% in all likelihood. So I really fully expect that the next biennial budget, especially the first year, will be pretty difficult.
John.
Yeah, we're talking about property taxes now. You're saying went up 6.5% this year, maybe 1.5% on a regular year. Why don't you discuss some of our other sources of income? We've got sales tax, which have been doing quite well over the last several years. Can you talk about some of those other sources of revenue that we have?
Well, we have everything from parks and recreation fees. We have interest income, which is little or nothing these days because of interest rates. Occupation taxes are one of our big sources, and it doesn't grow normally at the rate of inflation. That's I think it's $8 or $10 million. Our growth or our return on equity from LES, that's not going to grow 4%. It'll probably, I think it's limited 2.5% growth or some number. So there just are not a lot of other sources of revenue other than sales tax and the occasional increase in property tax with the revaluations that keep up with the rate of inflation of the things we do around here.
Out of the general fund, and of course we have other ancillary funds too, which amount to quite a bit, but out of the general fund, I think we're at 178 million projected this year, if I'm not mistaken.
No, the general fund I think is more in the 130 or 40 range.
Pardon me.
I can dig it up. Here,
oh, okay.
It's kind of
I guess the budget is 178 or something.
Yeah,
pardon me.
Right.
So out of the general fund, what percent of that is sales tax? What percent currently isn't anticipated to be property tax and some others?
I don't have that broken out by percentages, but if you give me just a second here, the sales tax is roughly $70 million. Property tax is about $53 million. And I'll find out what the total general fund budget here is in just a second. It's for next year, $149.1 million.
That is, I'm sorry, that's the general, or that's just what?
That's the general fund portion of the tax budget.
Portion, and then the tax budget is how much again?
173.2.
Darn, those 3s and 8s look a lot alike. Thank you very much for correcting me. So we had, if the general fund's 149, you said 70 is property tax, 53 million, 70 million, 53 million is sales tax. That's 123 million. So that leaves about 26 million. I think you said 10 million occupation tax, or?
Yeah, 8 or 10 million.
And then you've got 7 million from LES, if I recall correctly.
No, we do 3 or 4 million of fund balances.
34?
3 or 4 million.
3 or 4. 20, so is there another 6 million somewhere?
Well, there's various things like fees. One of the things about the fees, though, that we charge is the city attorney's office. For many, many years, many different city attorneys says we can only recover what our costs are. So those we can't raise in a way to cover other expenses other than the fees for the programs we're providing. So those are not a source of covering inflationary costs in the budget.
But a good thing is we've been operating a little bit better in recent years, in that we've had fees that otherwise we just covered under the general fund. So we're now getting that cost recovery.
More methodical about it.
Jane.
Can you talk a little bit about our pension liability in light of the way the market has been going in the last couple of days?
the end of a prior month, and I can't remember whether it's June or July, we were like 0.75% up. That's 0.75%. And since that point in time, the market has done nothing but go down. So I think we're going to be in negative territory as far as the return for the year. And we assume 6.75 positive.
Actually, we assume 7.5 for the current year. Starting September 1, it'll be
Okay.
6 3/4.
This last September 1.
Pardon me?
It was this last
I
September.
believe it's this September 1 forward.
Well, in any case, we're not coming anywhere
Yeah.
near.
We're not making, I mean, we should have made 20 million and we're at flat, and probably the month of August has knocked us down from the data I've gotten is another 10 to 20 million, depending what happens at the end of today here, or what happened.
And so the amount that we have in the budget that we have to pay for pensions is,
Well, what's recommended for next year is, I think, 9.6 million, and got in the budget about 7, and really no place to make up that difference. And the unfortunate part about the market timing right now is that our evaluation is done as of August 31st, and it's obviously not going to recover sufficiently in time for the end of the year to have a very pretty looking valuation report next spring.
Other questions?
Well, you've been finance director or interim finance director for a long time. How many years for the city?
4 for
Okay.
that, and I've been in charge of the budget for 26.
Budget for 26. Can you give us a little historical perspective on our levy, on our property tax levy? And I think a lot of people would be surprised by how little money the city of Lincoln gets of the property tax dollars as opposed to, say, the schools. So I think it's helpful to have that context for our discussion.
I think in the current fiscal year, I think we're taking 15.6% of the property taxes from Lincoln residents. Back in, it'd been early 90s, at one point our property tax rate was around 50 cents, and right now it's at 32 cents. And only one time since 1994 have we raised the property tax rate for anything other than voter-approved bond issues. And that was, I think, in 2011, 2012.
So the levy's actually come down over time from 50 cents to 32.
Yeah, it's nearly 40% down.
And at the same time, the city's grown by leaps and bounds.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Well, I think we need to put some of that in perspective. That was in the 1990s that it went from the 50 cents down primarily. However, since the turn of the century, since 2000, anyway, we've done a couple of things. For example, we went into the joint public agency, the JPA, with the county on the jail. And prior to that time, the city was paying the county roughly 1.2 to 1.3 million to house our prisoners. When that occurred with that new JPA, which added a new property tax levy, the city did not reduce its mill levy. So that was a gain to us without a change. So actually that was inherently a property tax increase. So there have been some other elements like that where we've shifted costs that previously came out of the city's budget. And so that's enabled us to keep that levy down there. So in some respects, though, there has been an increase.
I readily acknowledge there's been a lot of factors, cost-wise,
7 million with the
revenue.
LES dividend, another
Yes, yeah.
7 million, and so the host of things that we have done to increase tax collections. One way or another.
Other questions? All right, thanks, Steve. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this item?
Again, Chairman Fellers, members of the council, my name is Kyle Fisher, 1128 Lincoln Mall. Again, here on behalf of the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to draw your attention to one item in the budget resolution, 2 items actually in the budget resolution today. On the copy I have, I believe they're on page 4 of your resolution. I just wanted to highlight to the 7 of you the importance of these 2 items in the budget, the air show promotional expense and the roller skating promotional expense. Both of those are events that we put on as a community that are true public-private partnerships. They're funded with private donations and some parts of public dollars that are provided either by the city or the county. Through our Convention and Visitors Bureau, our chamber, our partnership, those investments of on here you'll see it's $60,000 total, $30,000 each. Both of those produce a return of over $10 million of economic impact to our community. I think in our last air show, the gate count was around 250,000 visitors to our community for that event alone. And for the roller skating, it's 2 weeks of hotel room nights. It's 2 weeks of people coming into our community from outside of Nebraska in most cases to stay in our hotels, to shop, to buy gas, to eat at our restaurants, to do whatever it is a visitor wants to do in our great city. I think sometimes in these discussions, when we see an item on a piece of paper, we don't always understand where it says air show promotion, what that is. So I just wanted to bring that to this body's attention, and any subsequent changes that you consider on the resolution, to keep that in mind, that we need that true public-private partnership to be fully funded for what we want to accomplish in bringing visitors in our community and growing our tax base. So,
Jane.
Kyle, could you go over the numbers again? I'm sorry, I didn't write them down. How many visitors do we anticipate for the air show?
Well, I think, and I'll, if I'm incorrect in saying anything at this impromptu presentation to you, I'll get you some correct numbers, but I believe the number that we had from our last air show, we do them about roughly every 5 years, was 250,000 people to visit the air show that's put on at the Lincoln Air Base. That's over the course of 2 days. Usually a Saturday and a Sunday. Blue Angels, anybody, I can give some promotion on it, but the Blue Angels will be here again. Great part to get out there and get to the airport and see them. But those are folks that come in, and obviously there's not 250,000 residents of Lincoln that show up out there. We might have some pretty vacant driveways. These are visitors to our community that come from as close as Raymond, Nebraska, and far away as out of state. So, like I said, the two events combined, the roller skating and the air show, are a $10 million economic impact for only a $60,000 investment. And so I think, as long as this council can be aware of what those two items are in this budget, and if you consider any changes, to know that that's what those two items do.
Other questions? John?
Great comments, and I agree with you on that. Just out of curiosity, maybe Mr. Mull here would help too, but we also have the lodging tax, for example, that funds a lot of the Convention and Visitors Bureau. Just out of curiosity, with all those people it brings in, including those great Navy pilots, where are we at? And I'm just trying to look at overall, this is another revenue stream that goes into promotional activities, and granted, it's nice to have the city participate, but and 30,000 isn't a huge amount out of 173.2 million, but is that something that down the road, or maybe it has been gradually declining, in fact it probably has, but just something that is more legitimately over time we can work to let the lodging tax totally do its purpose?
Well, and I'll let Jeff introduce himself. I'll briefly say, and Jeff is a much better expert on this than I am, Councilman. It is a partnership with the city and the county and the private sector. I do want to be on record as saying that they do contribute as well, and Jeff, I think, can add something.
Jeff Mull, Executive Director of the Convention and Visitors Bureau. Beautiful Lincoln, Nebraska, by the way. Looking at these two events combined, when we look at the roller skating relationship that we have, I mean, that's going on almost a 25 to 30-year relationship that we've had as hosting the roller skating national championships. It brings in significant income. Kyle said 2 weeks. Actually, we're looking at 4 weeks that we'll have skaters here starting next year. We hope to have a 2-year agreement with these folks. So it has a substantial impact on our hotels in July and August, when typically the hotel revenues in July and August are typically where we're at the lake, we're out doing things. To have people coming to Lincoln's a significant impact. So there's not many hotels right now that would tell you that they would, that piece of business could go away. The money that comes from the city is a small component of the overall investment that we make as a Convention and Visitors Bureau to keep that event here. In event production world, it's all about offsetting costs to make the event affordable to bring into your community. So the less expense they have coming in for rent, with roller skating, there's a subfloor that needs to go down. We're going to be doing it at a new venue next year at the Speedway Sporting Village. So we have a new venue, new expenses. So those dollars are essential for us to help keep the overall budget intact for roller sports. From an air show component, the component that we get from the city is part of that public-private partnership, and just again a small component of what goes into the overall budget for the air show. And both of these budgets are, I don't want to say they're set, but it's something that we've always known what the costs are. So this contribution from the city is an essential part of that investment.
Other questions for Jeff and Kyle? All right. Thank
Again,
you.
we'd just ask as you consider this that we consider those. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this item?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. Kobe Mack. I don't have any prepared remarks. I'm appearing just on behalf of myself, and I'll apologize if I don't have time to stay for a lot of questions. I've got to go do a radio show that starts here fairly quickly. But about a couple hours ago, in a room right behind where I'm standing, you all participated in a meeting where Councilman Roy Christensen proposed some property tax relief. And I witnessed a lot of angst and some gnashing of teeth and concern. And, I've been following the city budgets pretty closely now for 11 years or a little bit more. And I remember when the mayor came to us and said, I'd like to go to this 2-year budget idea. And if we do a 2-year budget, that after a year we can go back and we can make some tweaks if we want to. And, there's some pretty substantial tweaks that are being proposed this year, but we're also a city that has a lot going on and on the grow, certainly. But I guess what I would ask is that if you're open-minded to spending the additional dollars and spending more tax dollars, also be open-minded to perhaps making some property tax relief available to the community as well. So I just hope that as you move forward today with your deliberations on this, that you do consider the other option, which is returning some of it to the taxpayers of the community. Otherwise, I think I would probably be in favor of going back to 1-year budgets and let's just go ahead and have those discussions every 12 years. So thank you for your time.
12 months, maybe.
What's that?
12 years, I'd vote for
You
that.
said 12 years.
Every 12 months. Yes, thank you, Council.
Imagine what those change resolutions will look like. Questions for Kobe?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this item? Please come forward.
Jane Kinsey with Watchdogs of Lincoln Government. We want to protest some of the additions to this budget. While we appreciate Mr. Christensen's wanting to lower the property tax rate by 1 cent, we say it needs to be lowered even more. We don't see any additions to care for the low-income citizens who are identified by the Lincoln Vital signs, or for the people over 65 who reside in our city and who make up the largest part of our citizenship. The mayor and this council seem to believe that most of Lincolnites love to participate in sports, go to bars, and mingle in parks, when in truth, the majority of the people in our town don't have the money or the inclination to do so. Especially galling to us is the fire truck addition that's requested in the face of the fact that the number of fires are down and the medical calls are up, making medical calls the #1 reason for emergency vehicles. The money allocated for the fire trucks is a waste of money and should be placed more in our city, such as maintaining streets, education, and maintenance for public safety. This is a better use of reaching all of the people in the city. City officials have called for consultants to study the police fire fund, but this budget has refused to follow their recommendations. What is the purpose of paying consultants to give you advice and then you don't follow it? That's like people going to a medical doctor and not doing what the doctor suggests streets in order for them to become healthy. The stock market just fell dramatically, as Ms. Raybould states, over 1,000 points, and hurt the fund even more. And it hurt every citizen in the United States and in Lincoln who has a pension fund or who depends on a 401k to assist their income. There is no prediction that any great surge will bring back the money anytime soon. The city has a windfall of money from the increase in the property tax assessments and should recognize that most citizens will be paying more because of that. Citizens of Lincoln deserve a break by cutting questionable items in the budget. Voters just gave you a 1/2 cent increase in the sales tax in order for you to have the emergency system. Now is the time to give back to them some of the money that you have from the increased assessments. Everything they buy, including the basic utilities, is going to go up with this tax. I don't think people realize that when they voted for it. Parks are lovely and needed, but not at the expense of basic needs, such as shelter and utilities. I'd also like to say that this budget is not easily read, which is one of the reasons I asked about the audit and how it would be presented. For instance, it says StarTran needs money. What's that for? If you go online and you look at the budget, there's no explanation for that. Also, when you're talking about Antelope Valley has $900,000 or so dollars. What's that for? We were told there was an excess in the Antelope Valley project so that $10 million could go to the streets. It doesn't make sense to the average person, or even perhaps an person skilled in reading budgets, to come to an answer about that. So I ask you to consider the needs of the average person in this city. You've been given a windfall, and it's time to give back some of this to the residents of Lincoln. We also asked the Lincoln Public School Boards to do the same kind of thing. It sounds like that fell on deaf ears. I hope that this request will not fall on deaf ears today.
Questions, John?
Thank you, Ms. Kinsey. Just a clarification, the taxpayers approved a 1/4 cent sales tax for the radio system and the new fire station. I think you said a 1/2 cent. So
Did I? Okay, excuse me.
That's much better than Mr. Mack's 12 years versus 12 months. So. Anyway, secondly, you brought up the fire trucks, and you talked about the medical response, which is right. 80% of the calls are medical, very few are fire-related, and we've had that increase. What are your thoughts on the ERVs, the emergency response vehicles that are more of a extended cab pickup?
I think that is a good idea, and I would, as a member of speaking for the watchdogs, I would believe in that. I'll tell you, I had a particular incident in my next door neighbor. Their elderly mother fell, and they could not get her up. 7 people came in 3 vehicles for this purpose. 2 of them went inside, and 5 stood around for an hour. That's not good use of taxpayer money. And maybe that was an aberration, but I'm not so sure it is. We have had in our neighborhood several calls for medical assistance. And it just seems overdone to have that many people standing around waiting and having two people serve the person.
And the last question, you brought up pension retirement plans, and with the city, we've got a defined benefit plan for our police and firefighters. As of August of 2014, it had an $88 million deficit. We were talking about the stock market, what's happened here. That deficit's probably going to exceed $100 million, go up another $12 million, maybe more, because of the poor performance. What suggestions do you have for us to remedy that huge underfunding in the pension plan?
I say take the money from the fire trucks and add that in and tweak however you could. I mean, these are the two groups of employees by the city that the residents support in every way. And they appear to be, in some cases, as I mentioned, about the medical calls, overdone, but that could also be arranged in some other way. So I would suggest that you need to, don't hire consultants to come and give you an answer and then not listen to it. I mean, this is ridiculous, and it's a waste of the taxpayers' money. If you want consultants to just reinforce your opinion, that's a misuse of taxpayers' money. And I'll tell you, a lot of people believe that's why consultants are hired, to feed back what the government group wants to hear. So they have made a recommendation that you're not even following, and that is sad. I would suggest that you need to have a certain percentage to bring this up to where it should be. We can't depend on the stock market. Some economists say we're in stagflation, like Japan has been for 10 or so years, and this could very well be the same thing. Not going to make money on the stock market.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this item? Please come forward. Okay, next item.
All right, next is item.
We do staff questions, I'm sorry.
All right.
You want to bring up?
Could Tom Cassidy please approach the dais? I think, given that one of the major expenses in this proposal is the fire apparatus, I'd like to give you a chance to explain why we see that before us. If you could respond to some of Ms. Kinsey's concerns, and also help us understand, because it is an interesting issue, like how many fire trucks and engines do we need given the limited number of calls? We can get more flexible in the kind of fleet we use, but is there a minimum we have to address fires in the city when they do occur, however infrequently?
Tom Cassidy, Public Safety Director. Yes, there is a minimum, and the minimum you need is enough that you can position them in stations that are prepared to respond to a structure fire within 4 minutes travel time. And we don't meet that goal now. We'd like to meet it in the future. We are involved in a station optimization plan that will help us spread that resource out and probably make a little bit of an improvement there if we can do that before the city grows another 20 square miles. And I think we can. So I don't think we need more fire apparatus right now. I think what we need is to get our apparatus replaced and get them better positioned. Regardless of the fact that we don't have very many fires, we still need to have ladder trucks and fire engines so that we have the right kind of apparatus when we do respond to a fire, and they need to be distributed around the city in a way that we can cover the geography in a reasonable time period. Time really does matter. If you've ever watched a structure fire like the one we had over on J Street this past spring, just incredible how quickly that fire can spread. And if you have your fire apparatus spaced out so distant from the locations where people actually live and work, you're not able to do that. So we've gone through a lot of work on a fire station optimization plan to try to get those apparatus positioned better, but we certainly do not need less of them. You could compare Lincoln to any other city. of similar size and scope, and you'll see that we're on the low end in the total number of fire companies that we have deployed. So we are definitely not fat on the number that we have. Now, Ms. Kinsey brought up a clear fact that most of what we do is medical emergencies, and that's true. Most of what, the United States Navy does is train, and that's also true. We have this resource so that on the bad day, we've got the equipment we need. A week doesn't go by that we don't have a pretty significant structure fire in this community. And if it happens to be in your home or your business, you'll be glad that we were within a reasonable travel time with fire apparatus to get there. We do handle lots of medical emergencies. It's about 81% of our total workload so far this year. It's growing by leaps and bounds. We're up 9.5% in medical emergencies so far this year compared to the same period last year. And last year we were up about 8% total for the year in medical emergencies. We are wearing out our fire apparatus because we're driving so much more than we were in the past. Fires have not decreased. They have stayed relatively stable here in Lincoln, so they're not increasing. The medical emergencies are increasing. And, we respond a fire engine as the first responding unit to a medical emergency because that's the vehicle that we have. If we had other kinds of vehicles distributed around the city, we might respond something different. We have one alternate response vehicle right now that we're using. I think it's worked out quite well. We are involved in arbitration with the union right now over that. They've objected to its use. And if that comes out in favor of the city's position on this, I'd like to have more of those vehicles because I'd like to prevent putting mileage on the bigger, more expensive equipment to the extent that we can without significantly jeopardizing public safety. We hope that when we open these new fire stations, the 4 stations that are covered by the station optimization plan, that we're, at least in a couple of those stations, we're able to open it with more than one apparatus, so to be a fire apparatus and an alternate response vehicle as well. But we're at least 2.5, maybe 3 years off from that, given the flow of revenue that's going to be coming from the sales tax.
One thing I wanted to address as well, because it's been said that perhaps these additions don't address the needs of low-income citizens or seniors. I recall from our discussions with the Public Safety Ballot Initiative that for the fires that do happen, they often are at senior care facilities at the edge of the city. Can you speak to a little bit about how the fire department does serve seniors?
Well, the medical emergencies are skewed quite a bit by the changing demographics of our population. More of us who are baby boomers are getting to the age in life where we are more likely to have medical problems that require emergency medical services. And a lot of that growth is occurring in not really assisted living centers, but senior independent living facilities. And many of these are being built on the fringe of the city. So that's where land's available, that's where development's occurring. And you can look all around Lincoln, pretty much all 4 quadrants, and find relatively new or under construction senior independent living facilities. That's one of the reasons that I'm particularly set on getting this optimization plan done, is because we need to be able to have a quicker response to a medical emergency at Tabitha's facility, the Walter, and at South Lake Village out at 92nd and Highway 2. These are places that we cannot reach in a reasonable time right now, and we really need to be able to. Ms. Kinsey brought up an example of a case where she said 7 firefighters arrived at the scene. I could look into the details of that if I knew the time and place that occurred. I can tell you it's quite typical in a medical emergency to have 2 apparatus. One of those is the fire engine that was the first response vehicle. The second one is the ambulance that follows it in the event that the patient needs to be transported. And that would typically involve either 5 or 6 firefighters, depending on how the engine was staffed. 5 or 6 people is not a lot for many medical emergencies. In fact, it's if you've ever been to the hospital emergency room, I want you to remember how many people treated you when you were there for a broken tibia or a dislocated joint or chest pain. If it was chest pain, I'd say there were a lot more than 7 people that treated you during the course of that. There are many, many tasks that have to go on in a medical emergency. Someone has to monitor vital signs. Someone has to monitor the airways. Someone has to start drugs if that's necessary. Someone has to perform CPR if it's a cardiac arrest. And that's, these are all very time consuming. Moving patients requires quite a bit of resource as well. I shouldn't have to tell you this. The seats are wider at newly built arenas for a reason. And, the idea of two people being able to handle transporting a patient is not going to happen very often in this day and age. If we had a different vehicle at some of those stations, we might be able to respond, a 2 or 3 person rescue crew rather than an engine company, and save some mileage on that. On the other hand, we'd have to weigh what's the added cost of putting that second vehicle into service, buying it, maintaining it, fueling it, equipping it, and is it going to be used enough to offset that as opposed to an awfully nice general purpose vehicle and a fire engine. Fire engines aren't the big ladder trucks. They're the pumpers. They're great for hazardous materials. They're great for fires. They're great for medical emergencies. They're not ideal for any of those, to tell the truth. It's a general purpose, all hazards vehicle. And the problem with an ARV is that although I believe in it real strongly in certain applications, it really is a single purpose vehicle. It can respond to a medical emergency and do that quite well. It cannot respond to a fire and begin suppression of a fire. And it doesn't have enough room on board to carry the kinds of equipment that you need for something like an overturned vehicle, a traffic crash, or a hazardous materials spill.
One more question.
Go ahead.
Can you explain to us the kind of cost-benefit analysis you've gone through about whether or not to buy a new vehicle? I mean, we can maintain to a certain point. At what point does it become more effective to buy a new one? And also, can you speak to what your maintenance budget is in the fire department for apparatus?
We spent a little over $416,000 last year to repair fire apparatus. It's been going up steadily every year for the past 6 years. I've got data back to 2009 on that I think is pretty trustworthy. It's going up because the vehicles are aging. Half of our fleet is over 15 years old in our fire apparatus. All of our fire apparatus, with the exception of 2, are at the point where they really ought to be replaced if you follow the guidelines of the American Public Works Association on evaluating those vehicles. We've got several vehicles that have very large expenses for maintenance. We have paid more than the cost of purchase in maintenance costs over their lifetime. And we've got a few vehicles that are old enough to vote, and a couple, 2, that are old enough to drink. Last Friday, we had 3 of our 4 fire trucks. These are the ladder trucks that were out of service. That's a problem. And this fleet it's been neglected, frankly. And it's not been neglected because of any fault of anyone. It's been the economy, frankly. They're expensive apparatus. I feel very bad about that. It's $350,000 to buy a fire engine, probably minimum. That's a pretty basic fire engine. And at least $750,000 for a fire truck, the ladder truck, of which we have 4. They're very expensive. I wish they weren't, but they are. And we need them here in the community. And we owe it to our community and we owe it to our employees to make sure that the fleet's in better condition than it is. And if we can stretch out the life of some of these larger apparatus by deploying some alternate response vehicles, I am 100% behind that. And that's exactly what I intend to do, assuming that we have a favorable outcome from the arbitration.
John? And Cindy?
Yeah. Beyond this, we've just got to have some serious discussion on our ambulance and our medical response. It's become medical response. It's an ambulance company and happens to fight a fire now and then. We've got the police and firefighters pension going on a $100 million deficit. Fire stations, we solved that. The taxpayers passed a 0.25% increase for the repositioning. With that, we have the new stations there. And so everyone was supportive of that. We're talking about equipment right here. I prefer to use the phrase ERV, emergency response vehicle, because doggone it, why send a big apparatus, a $750,000 ladder truck, like you said, to send out to somebody who unfortunately overturned in a wheelchair? That is false economies. you talk about transport and lifting people. By the time they're lifted, you're going to have every ERV, emergency response vehicle, with 3 or maybe 2 people in it, plus you've got the ambulance with another 2, plus you probably have a police officer there. You've got the personnel there, but what we're not doing is taking reality here. Those ERVs will save tremendously. As I've suggested to you, leave one of the fire crew back at the station, so there, if there is a fire, he or she can drive that apparatus out, and the others call off that emergency if it's such they can call off, or maybe you get another station, but nonetheless, you can get the apparatus out there. So it's the deployment approach. We're not updating for these huge 9% increase in medical, and some of it's due to union rules, management rules that we've delegated, to be held up on ERVs by arbitration. I think the people should know what that is. That is incredibly concerning. You know, our personnel, you know, the deployment, the whole way we do that on the teams, and so we recognize the medical lopsiding versus the fire. And then finally, you've got system status management. Even with fire stations out there, my colleague, Ms. Gator-Baird brought out and you brought out how we're getting retirement homes in the perimeter and other areas where land is cheaper. Maybe even with our nice fire stations, we know that based upon computer not simulations, but computer statistics, that we know Friday night down at 14th and O, you've got to have extra personnel, at least police-wise. Look at the statistics, and it may be from time to time some of our fire personnel who are medical paramedics sit out there in an ERV at an eatery somewhere outside the fire station. I mean, the former ambulance company used to do that. There are ways that we can deploy and come up to date in our systems. And it's still going to cost money. I mean, that $100 million is not going away. But we talk about these individually. We get caught up in union negotiations, arbitration. The arbitrations are going on for a year. This is ridiculous that our city is hand-tied in this way. Let's get out there and be in a do-it mode, and in a way that's both looking at systems to protect our citizens from the medical emergencies. I mean, I hear a lot about this too. Ms. Kinsey is saying what I hear a lot about. I get so many complaints from people that say you had half the Foreign Legion out there, and
anytime you do one of those, I'm happy to look into it. The situation she described is what we call a lift assist. We do not send multiple units to a lift assist.
Well,
we generally send one apparatus to help that citizen. There had to be something more going on here for that many units to respond.
Let's get the facts in it, because I've heard, anyway, but we've got to sit down and really have a meaningful discussion with all parties. Let's get the union president in here too, and have the discussion from the firefighter standpoint. But we're at loggerheads on this, and so we try to tweak it. We passed a 1/4-cent sales tax that's going to raise $3+ million over 3 years to do that optimization. But let's do the rest of it.
All right, Cindy?
Thank you. You mentioned that the maintenance and repair of the vehicles has been going up for a number of years, correct?
Yes.
So the need to replace these vehicles has been on your radar for a while?
20 years.
So would you say that it's, I guess it's not unforeseen. Back when we did the biennial, and I wasn't here, but when we did the biennial last year, it was foreseen at that time that these vehicles would need to be replaced as well.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have a follow-up question. I think I appreciate Councilman Camp's thought about efficiency with how fire personnel are deployed, but something he mentioned was sort of troubling, the implication that somehow we are not having the conversations we need to have. Is there some conversation you need to have that you're not able to have, or is there something you wish you could do that you can't, and if so, what's stopping you?
The union contract. So I have to live within the boundaries of the collective bargaining agreement. And one of the things in the collective bargaining agreement is that we have to have 76 firefighter on duty around the clock 24/7. I don't have the ability to have a larger number of people on duty at 4 o'clock in the afternoon when our workload is peaking than I do at 4 a.m. when our workload is quite low. I don't have that flexibility. It's not lack of desire.
You've done that with the police department. I know you're a big supporter of that kind of model.
Absolutely. Police
Don't you call it your
departments
Starbucks model?
Yeah,
Is it?
police departments around the country use dynamic staffing. They generally staff more people during their peak hours on their peak days than they do during their off-peak periods. That's not true in the fire service. The bottom dollar is I've got a union contract that I have to live within, and the other constraint I have is budget. Even if we were to prevail on the arbitration, I've told you that I'd really like to have more ARVs out there. I don't think I can afford to have an ARV at every single station sitting behind every single fire engine or fire truck, because that too is an expense. It's $100,000, and that's basically a new piece of equipment that you have to have in addition to the engine or the truck. So I think it makes the most sense when you've got a very busy station where you're really going to be piling some miles on the engine or the truck otherwise. That's where it makes a lot of sense. It also makes sense to do at the stations where you have the big ladder trucks, because they're especially expensive to own and operate. And for those vehicles in particular, it makes a lot of sense to have an alternate response vehicle so the company officer, the fire captain, can go out onto the apparatus floor and take the vehicle that's appropriate for the task at hand. If it happens to be someone that's been injured in an accident in a softball field, you could take the alternate response vehicle. If it happens to be a multi-car collision at 33rd and Cornhusker, you can take the truck. So in the event that you need the hydraulic tools and the other capabilities that it provides. And that's what I'd like to happen.
Thank you.
Other questions? I think we kind of missed the point on fire trucks. We have 6 pieces of equipment that are approaching 20 years of life, and they are becoming unserviceable, which is really the reason for putting this in the budget. I mean, we have 6 pieces of equipment that from any day could go down and be down for a significant point of time, or just be down indefinitely. Is that correct?
Yes, we have had 3 of our large apparatus in the past 2 years that have been taken out of service because they were simply no longer safe.
That's all I need to hear. Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak, or any other questions? Cindy?
Yeah, I'd like to speak with Jeff Kirkpatrick.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Kirkpatrick, thank you. I just have a question about the budget and its potential interaction with the CIP, which is on 3rd reading tonight. And the CIP transfers funds from one project to another and so forth. Is there any impact on if we pass a budget that doesn't allow for funding to put money in to something that's paying money out under the CIP?
There is a fair amount of interaction between the 2 pieces of legislation, the ordinance having to do with the CIP and then the budget resolution. And the reason why they were introduced the way they were would be so that although they came up for hearings on different days, so that they will be voted on at the same time. Because I think if you pass one and not the other, it doesn't work well, because they do need to go together. And actually, it's something that Steve Hubka could address more specifically than I could, as far as which funds interact. But I can tell you, they definitely do interact.
Okay, I just had the general question, if we were to delay a vote on the budget resolution, should we also delay a vote on the CIP? And are we able to do that?
Yes, you can delay the vote on either one of them. This week you could. And should you, I think that as a policy, procedurally you should, to make sure that when you pass them, every effort is made to make sure that they do work well together. Because you could create some significant difficulties if they don't.
Thank you.
Other staff questions? Okay. Any other questions? We're good? Okay. All right. Teresa, next item.
All right, next is item 25, special permit 15030, application of Oak Lake Evangelical Free Church to construct an 85-foot tall monopole for personal wireless facilities at 3300 North First Street.
Anyone wishing to speak to this item? Okay. Oh, thank you.
Oh.
Robert Marshall. I live at 3339 Gregory Street. Am I supposed to swear in or something like that? Okay. Lincoln, Nebraska, and I'm also the secretary, the treasurer actually, 'cause we don't have a secretary right now, but the treasurer for the Round Table Heights Owners Association. We have 55 members that all those houses were within 1,000 feet of the 85-foot tower proposed to be put in at the church area. When I look at the minutes, or I don't know what you'd call the attachments or the like, and I've brought this up before at some of the planning commission meetings, didn't get really satisfactory solutions or answers to the citing of a location in accordance with your ordinance 2768080. When I look at where it's going, it's a residential area. It is going to impact, all that also is refuted, the evaluation of the houses that can look at that 85-foot edifice within 200 to 300 feet of our houses, and there's a lot of them in the entire association of 55 members can at some point see that 85-foot tower from their backyards or their front yards. When I look at that on page, it's item 2A, it talks about the purpose and how to evaluate what is acceptable of an 85-foot tower. I don't see how it fits. Why I don't see how it fits? There are other locations that are more amenable within 1,000 feet. We have a park. We have a maintenance facility where it could sit, which is right at, I think it's like 5th and Adam Street. Then I find out when I question how they did the siting, I was told, Verizon said, you have 2 lots. You accept that and none else. And I'm saying, what? Are we just saying, Verizon, you have employees here, you pay a heck of a lot more taxes than we do, then so be it, whatever you want. And I question it, and the Planning Commission just sort of ignored it. And I have a problem with it. Does our association feel we'd like to have that tower there? How would you like an 85-foot tower in your backyard? I don't think you'd like it at all. And I'm sorry, I raised my voice, I shouldn't do that. And I do appreciate you listening to me. And I will say the Planning Commission, I give them kudos there. They got us together with the church who cannot maintain their current property. And I sit there and I look at, and this question came up, okay, we have the tree require planting in our association. Numerous ones have died. Has the city ever replaced them? No. Do you think Verizon or the church is going to replace them? No. They're talking about a 37-foot high tower screen. I'm sorry. This doesn't make sense to me. Nobody in our group feels it's right, but we feel that we're told pretty much, well, it's progress. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for testifying today. Which association are you with?
Round Table Heights Association. We're a small association. Jack Griggs, our president, he's a realtor. He couldn't be here today. We basically lost a lot of our support of coming to these events when it was 8-0 after we had objections and we didn't get the answers we felt should have been pending. Instead, it was more like, well, this is the way it is. We gotta have infrastructure, and so there it is.
And I'm sorry, so these meetings, how many meetings were you involved in?
Well, we first went to the first meeting. Nobody knew about it, and we weren't notified until the 2 days before the 4th of July, and it was the following Monday. That's really good notice.
Was that a meeting that Verizon held or the church?
No, it was your planning department.
Okay. Did you have any meetings with the church or Verizon?
Not until we finally had a meeting after that fact. We went and met with that, and we had the Verizon representative for the company they use and your director of the Planning Commission. It was really interesting. The Planning Commission, after hearing our first meeting, says, well, you got a problem with the church. Go settle your problem with the church. That was so far off the beaten path, I couldn't believe it. And I'm sorry, that upset me a lot. I'm done. I'm sorry. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Jane.
Mr. Marshall, did you say that the church was agreeable to add some additional trees for screening?
No, that's part of the Verizon agreement to put church trees that would reach a level of 37 feet in 20, 25 years. Now, I will say this. I planted trees that were probably 8 to 10 years old in my backyard, and so far in the last 3 years, I've lost 2 of them because of age or disease. The same thing's going to happen because all of our trees along 3rd Street, Richards Court, they're going to be destroyed, it sounds like, because guess what? They are. You know, they're the trees that this bug's going to come and take it all away. So are those going to be replaced? I doubt it. I will say this, it was good news and bad news because of that meeting between us and the church. They did go in and clear out a bunch of the dead in the area that they said was screening our association from it. These are old trees. They're sitting in water runoff areas because of the flood issue there. And you think those are going to last? But those trees to get 37 foot tall, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And so, you know, I really think the Planning Commission cannot just say, okay, these 2 side lots, okay, we'll put something there no matter what. And that's how I read and what I've heard in those discussions with the Planning Commission is that Verizon says, I want it here, it's going to be here. Now, they gave us some reason, some, engineers, etc. I don't understand that. Neither did anybody else in that meeting. Well, maybe one did, who is my neighbor, who used to work on crews that built those things. So with that, thank you so much. I do appreciate it for listening to what I have to say.
John?
You know, some of the, not to be design-oriented here, but there have been other cell towers that have had what they call a monopole, where they doesn't have the antennas around, like this one is illustrated to show. Does that matter to you if you had an 85-foot monopole that just stood up there?
It is supposedly a limited, I don't know what you would say there. It's 85 foot tall, and there are two providers, I guess, that can use that tower.
It says at least 2, so there may be more, but.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was limited to 2. But furthermore, I sit here and I ask the question, okay, if somebody doesn't maintain the screen, who's going to take care of it? Because I know the church can't, because they aren't taking care of their current issues that they have, and under liable, you know, they're a nonprofit organization. I don't blame them. In fact, I go over and I help, and I'm not a member of the church. But the thing that I look at, why can't we do 50 feet? Why can't we put something similar to what's going on at 40th in Old Cheney? Where I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they're building it looks like a bell tower, which is going to be, and they said, well, that's only 50 feet tall, I think it's not 85. So, and then the real thing is, I was out helping them this weekend. I was mowing the side of the ditch that they can't get to because they can't get across it anymore unless they go up on a city street and drive around and get down to that side. So I've been mowing a large portion of that just because it had to be maintained. But they were clearing out some brush, and they took out most of the dead trees that were in there, which I appreciated. But by the time they did that, you could see 2 things. Number one, you would see that tower if you're standing in my backyard. Even when it's first put in, you can see it. Now, I'm 72 years old next month. I don't know if I'm going to be living there for 25, 30 years, but I'm speaking on behalf of my neighbors who think this is an atrocity. Now, the other thing that I noticed is that, like, the one guy came over and I asked him, I says, do you think this, I really thanked him for clearing out, I mean, there was all kinds of brush. The thing was always slowing down the flood for downstream to some of my other neighbors, but it acted almost like a beaver dam. Well, now that's all gone. And the individual I was talking to, I think he was a deacon of the church. I'd met him a couple times. And I said to him, he says, when are you going to get some kind of a bridge across this? And he says, well, do you look at that there? Those trees are still in the sort of the creek area, whatever you want to call it, the drainage area. And he said, we've got a real erosion problem here, and I don't know if we can put a bridge across there and have it stay. So I'm asking you, okay, you got these trees that they really wrote a bunch of that up in here about how it protected the vision from our houses. And the reality is they're not going to last. And furthermore, with the erosion and things that are going on there, and that wasn't the church's problem. That went clear back to the subdivision where somebody went bankrupt, et cetera, that was supposed to put it in. But we have issues out there, and we don't feel we're appreciated at all. I know we are. I know you're concerned. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tim Reisdorf, 3333 Greger Street. I'm opposed to this special permit. I'd just like to refer to the beginning of the resolution, whereas it says, whereas the community as a whole and the surrounding neighborhood and the real property adjacent to the area included within the site plan for this wireless facility will not be adversely affected. I feel it will be adversely affected visually. Financially, I don't know about selling my home. I'm sure I could probably still sell my home, but you know, there'll probably be a few less people interested in it. I'm looking at page 2. It says that for the overview for the wireless facility to address inadequate coverage in this area, which kind of goes in line with, is this an actual need of the cell tower, you know, of the cell company, or is it a want? You know, are they just trying to, because I know for the federal guidelines that it has to have lack of coverage for you guys to have to give them this. I'm just looking at their comprehensive plan, and it says provided care is taken in their design and setting. Typical strategies includes enhanced screening, low profile antennas, or a limit on the height of the tower. I'd kind of like the tower design to be included in this part. I guess that's my problem with it the most, is the coverage will be 6 foot tall and 8 foot tall. That's covering 7 to 10% will be covered. That's leaving 93 to 90% of that structure exposed that we're going to be looking at. I see that you guys have lower profile antennas. I mean, you guys, the Planning Commission. Looking at this, there's an A, a B, and it doesn't get till C, the third option here. And I just don't think that they've met everything required of them to prove that this site has to be the site. They reference on page 6 that the height limit is 35 feet in the surrounding areas. However, the nearby dwellings in the area do not approach the maximum height limits. That means we've already got small structures to begin with. So you're going to put an even larger structure there. They said the only other tall apparatuses in the area would include typical street lights and the parking lot lights. And that's not really going to disguise much. This photo here is of the Lynn Towns. I don't know which way do I put this.
We got it. We'll take it. Maybe.
So that's a half-mile radius, approximately, slightly larger, of the current stealth tower that is referenced in the letter from Ryan Mueller from Verizon Wireless. Now, they're saying here that the proposed location is set to improve our customer experience in the area between I-180, I-80, and Superior Street, which Superior Street, you can clearly see, isn't anywhere near a half-mile radius of that. I understand they say the area in there. That seems to be a lot less to me. I'm seeing a lot of park space here. And in his letter, He says the proposed search area is to offload our existing Lynn Towns location, which is that stealth tower in that park, and that the search area is based off of that. So right here, you'll see is the proposed site, clear out there right at the edge of that half-mile radius. Here's a view of the area that's looking west. And you can see that's what a cell tower, a monopole approximately would be looking like. There's your church steeple highlighted. You can see this this is looking then to the east from the west. And that's going to be a pretty large difference there. I had a company out of Seward, Laminated Wood Systems. This is a property looking to the east, I believe. And I had them draw up or give me some proposals on this is an actual to scale 80-foot structure in that area, taken from that church, that same spot, of a couple different designs that preferably opposed to this gigantic galvanized shiny steel pole would be I would be in total agreement with. I guess that is my biggest concern, is the visual impact that I'm going to have looking out my backyard or driving down the street, mainly my backyard, to see a big shiny 80-foot steel galvanized pole with, like you said, as many carriers as basically they're going to be able to put on it.
You good? Larry, question?
Mr. Reisdorf, thank you for coming down today to talk to us. I noticed in the staff report from the Planning Commission meeting that the Planning Commission was sympathetic to the concerns that you and your neighbors shared and wanted a chance for the applicant to meet with you directly because it appeared that hadn't happened prior to the Planning Commission meeting. Were you able to, they then deferred their decision on this for 2 weeks so that neighbors could meet with the applicant. Were you able to attend that meeting?
I was able to attend that meeting, and I brought photos similar to these. I didn't have these actually done of the actual site of other structures that are, across the country that have been put up. Mm-hmm. And that was my first thing, is that I wanted to propose that to them. When Mr. Coyle came back, then on the second meeting, the Planning Commission, everybody kind of blew that off. What I got from the Planning Commission, I forget his name, I've got it highlighted here, who moved to approve it, he's basically said, well, it's going to look out of context either way, so what do we care what it looks like? Well, the people that live there care what it looks like. And I don't think that, and everybody in the meeting, when I passed that around, I got incredibly good feedback from them. But what's disappointing is it seems that the property owner, the church, who, they don't pay any property taxes, but yet they're ones that are going to drive the design that we're going to have to look at, that are going to affect our property values, affect us adversely. I don't agree with that.
And my other question for you is, in that meeting, when you had the chance to propose some of these changes and there was some back and forth, were there any changes of any kind made to the original proposal, or did you walk out of that meeting with the same proposal headed back to planning?
Absolutely no changes at all. They basically said, well, we had the meeting, so we're good. And of that coverage, it says there's supposed to be over 50% are supposed to grow to 35 feet. And you can see in their rendering, they only have 3 trees, and it's been stated they only have 3 trees that are going to grow to 35 feet. Does that mean there's 6 trees total, 5 trees total? Because 50% or more are supposed to be to grow that. And like I said, 3, even if you have them grow to 35 feet, that's only 44%. You're still going to have 56% exposed in 20 years of the 3 trees. You're going to be spending a lot of time looking at a large silver object.
Cindy?
Thank you. I'm curious who was at the meetings that you were at after the Planning Commission. Was it Verizon? Was it the church? Was it both?
I haven't spoke to any Verizon. The only thing I've got from Verizon is that Ryan Mueller letter. That's the only thing I've seen from any Verizon. It was the SBA associate, Mr. Coyle, who's here in attendance now, a handful of church members, and a lot of maybe 20 to 30 actual residents.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this item?
He's coming.
Go ahead, yeah.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Joe Coyle, 312 East 70th Street, Kansas City, Missouri, 64113. I'm here representing who would be the tower owner, SBA Communications, in favor of this tower. Before I rebut a few of the things that the other gentleman mentioned, I'd just like to give you a brief overview on the processes and due diligence that have gone into this project over the last, let's say, 10 months to a year. That's when we first started our conversations with the church, and that was driven by a search area that is delineated by Verizon Wireless, who would be the first carrier on this tower. We did not only look at 2 lots. The search area actually included an area larger than just this church lot and the church to the south. However, as I'm sure you can understand, in this residentially zoned neighborhood, those 2 church locations were the only ones that would present themselves with a sufficient footprint for a tower. I did go outside that search area. I contacted a mobile home park to the south, another church to the north of the currently proposed location. And those folks were not interested, so they weren't viable. They weren't pursued. It's doubtful that Verizon would have even accepted those locations since they did lie outside of the search area. What we have here is what we call a capacity site. Mr. Reisdorf mentioned the existing site. The Lynn Town site is what Verizon refers to that as. It's in Roper Park. This proposed site at the church is designed to be a data offload site to provide capacity. As the need for capacity increases on the network, that's what drives these types of sites. And, unfortunately, where there is data need, that's where these capacity sites are going, and they're often encroaching into residentially zoned neighborhoods. So then our hands are kind of tied to go to the churches, the schools, public venues such as that have enough space that would provide, decent separation from the homes. 52 notices were sent out by the city, and as you mentioned, the First Planning Commission suggested that we do have a neighborhood meeting. I thought it was a good neighborhood meeting. It lasted about 2 hours. I was in attendance along with Mr. Brian Will from Planning. Mr. Will and I have worked closely on this project for many, many months, exchanged probably close to 100 emails, phone calls, and such over the course of that time. As long as I'm mentioning that, it was mentioned that no changes were made to the design as a result of that meeting. I'd like to point out that before we got to that point, working closely with Mr. Will, there were changes that were made to the design prior to us even putting in application, so that your planning department would recommend it, and so that your planning commission would also approve it, as they did with an 8-0 vote previously. A few of those items that were modified due to my talks with the city were the siting on the property. There were several different site locations that Mr. Will and I went over. The church has expansion plans. The church has memorial trees that have been planted for deceased young ones. There are many different things that were taken into consideration when we chose this site to the south. And one of the things that I thought was best about it was the existing stand of mature trees. Trees have been talked about a lot during both the neighborhood meeting and the commission hearings. The fact of the matter is that there are trees there today. They provide a nice buffer, and we have proposed landscaping that will fit with the city's design standards. We will be planting 27 trees around the 6-foot board-on-board fence, including 6 of those trees that will grow eventually, I'm not sure how long it will take, to 35 feet, as is required by the design standards. Basically, we have met the setbacks. We've been in compliance with the zoning ordinance, the design standards, and your planners and planning commission believe that this site does meet the restrictions of your comprehensive plan. As technology is changing and the data capacity is necessary for the network, you'll continue to see more and more sites like this in Lincoln. I know that you've had many before you recently, and that will still continue. The height was brought down, as I mentioned before, from 100 feet to an 80-foot pole. Verizon requires a 75-foot center line for their network needs. So we have gone as short as we can. The monopole, of course, is, as far as aesthetics goes, better than a guide tower, better than a self-support tower. Of course, it is not a stealth design. That decision is driven by zoning. That decision is driven by lots of times the church or school. If they want, a certain look to the tower on their property, oftentimes they will require that. It's a galvanized finish. It will not be shiny. And if I still have a couple more moments to rebut specifically some of the things that I heard Mr. Marshall and Mr. Reisdorf say, I'll go quickly through that. We did go at a half-mile radius from the proposed site. There are no available sites to co-locate. A big question that Mr. Marshall had was about who would maintain the trees that are planted. SBA Communications has a lease with the church. They are responsible for maintaining the trees. If a tree dies, it will have to be replaced per the lease and per the special permit. If those trees are not there, we are in violation of the special permit, and anyone would be able to call the City of Lincoln to file that complaint. This tower was not going to happen no matter what. It happened after much due diligence, tens of thousands of dollars on design, environmental studies, and such. And Mr. Marshall does state that he is here on behalf of his neighbors, and I know that some of them do share his sentiments. As was mentioned, there were about 20 or 30 neighbors that attended the neighborhood meeting, but I did speak to several of his neighbors that were very indifferent on the issue and do not oppose this as strongly as he does.
Questions? Jane.
Mr. Coyle, can you talk a little bit about the design of the tower? I can understand why they're a little bit concerned because it seems at the very top there's structure.
The antenna arrays at the top. Yeah, this tower is designed as a 2-carrier site, so there would be what you see in the picture would be Verizon at 75 feet, and then a second carrier, as required by the ordinance, could locate at 60 feet. So right now it's designed as a two-carrier site.
Did you work with the community and the neighborhood association on modifying the design, or is that up to the church, or is it up to Verizon, or is it up to you, or?
we listened, and when Mr. Reisdorf brought the examples of these stealth bell towers and things of that nature, there was some interest in that, and we did discuss that after the meeting. A couple of the photos that he put up showed the tower abutting the existing structure, which is only 1 story tall, with a larger vestibule area that I would say is probably no taller than 20 feet. So several of his neighbors actually opined at that meeting that it would look unnatural to have an 80-foot structure, even if it was concealed as, let's say, a bell tower or steeple design, that they thought, you know, that still wouldn't look good design-wise to them. Mr. Will and I worked on the way that the antennas are actually mounted, and you will see around town some standard platforms that we call kind of a boxing rings in the industry. This will not have that. Mr. Will required that we use a 4-foot standoff arm to hold the antennas, rather than a typical standard platform. That was one of his requirements.
Is there any other designs where you have these carriers on them that look a little different that you could have showed the neighbors, or?
Typically, we will just go with a monopole design in this type of situation.
John.
Okay. When you say monopole, you've got these arms going out, though, that you're saying planning required that, so you could have the 2 carriers. What about the poles that are just straight up and don't have those arms out?
Yes, that is what the existing pole is like in Roper Park. That is called a full stealth monopole that has the antennas and equipment inside the canister. For this site, one of the issues with that existing site that has that design is that this one is to offload that site. I do have, and Mr. Reisdorf mentioned that he hadn't heard from Verizon other than the statement I got from the RF engineer. I have a couple of folks from Verizon, RF engineers, that know a lot more about the design and what type of equipment would be needed on the proposed tower. And due to that equipment need, that stealth design would not work for them in this case.
Sounds like Verizon is dictating or steering a lot of things here, as you were saying earlier. Where I said, yeah, they're driving the process. Is this going to be 80 or 85 feet?
The 85 feet includes the lightning rod. So,
okay, so it's 85.
Yeah,
okay.
so it's we call it an 80. In the industry, we'd say it's an 80-foot pole with 5-foot lightning rod.
Okay. Now the ordinance or the resolution says at least 2 carriers, which to me implies you could have more than 2. Is this, can more than 2 be housed on this?
It is structurally capable of 3 arrays. It's just whether or not that 3rd carrier would want to be at a height. Mr. Marshall said, why can't it be 50 feet? It just all depends on that carrier's network and whether, a 40-foot, 50-foot center line would work for them. Typically, you'll see these center lines higher than 50 feet.
Okay, and I think I just misunderstood. I thought you said just 2 earlier, but so it does have that ability to have 3 then.
Yes.
Again, I don't like to drive the design process. Looking at some alternatives there, and we've had these situations elsewhere around Lincoln where the one down at 40th and Old Cheney, they did do a cross and so forth. What was that considered? You talked about the bell tower and apparently there's probably more cost to that because you've got a tripod pole, but.
Right, a tripole bell tower design is quite expensive. And like I said, something abutting the church, such as a faux steeple or something of that nature, that just wasn't explored.
One of the concerns I have is during my tenure on the city council, I go back to Jeff Fortenberg. He used to serve as another congressman, and now Mayor Beitler too is concerned about our entryway corridors. And as you come down I-180, this is one of them. And we've tried to be a little bit distinctive and architecturally amenable here in Lincoln, and so this is visible there. So I guess for that reason too, I look at this even beyond what the neighbors are looking at, and ways that we can provide a beautiful entrance that doesn't reveal a lot of mechanical antennas and so forth.
Sure. I think Mr. Will did touch on that in his report regarding.
Have him or planning come up. Okay.
Cindy, then Larry.
Thank you. I was just wondering if you visited with the church about the design changes that that its neighbors were requesting.
Church was at the meeting. We discussed it. Kind of at the end of the meeting, we were at a table with Mr. Reisdorf's examples of bell towers and such, and there were some neighbors there as well as church members discussing that. They looked at it. You know, they thought it looked nice, of course. You know, at that point, no one from the church thought that it was necessary to change the design at that point, based on, you know, a few folks' opinions on that, I guess.
Did anyone object to changing it to one of those designs? Anyone from the church?
I don't think they specifically objected to that. No.
Is anyone from the church here today?
No, they did come to the Planning Commission hearings, and of course they were at the meeting, at the neighborhood meeting, but not tonight. Larry?
The chairwoman of the Planning Commission explained when they moved to delay this item that the Planning Commission's policy is they like applicants to meet with the neighborhood prior to coming to them. And while that's not a formal requirement, it's often the case, and the Planning Commission does not like to delay items. If at any point during the 10 months that you worked with Brian Will, did the Planning Department suggest that you meet directly with the neighborhood association?
Yes, he did think it was a good idea. I contacted the nearest neighbor, which is the church to the south, and there's also a residence there that would be the closest to the tower, and that's in the report there that they had no objection. The homeowners to the east lie 180 feet away from the tower location. That separation is a good one as far as some of these capacity sites go. I've built sites recently that are 80, 90 feet away from homes, you know, that are on school property and things of that nature. So.
Yeah, I mean, I can appreciate we need our technology to function. We need this kind of coverage. This is a new reality that we're going to have to find places to site these. I guess I was just trying to understand if there was an active effort to reach out to the homeowners association, because oftentimes these kinds of issues or conflicts are best dealt with up front before they get to the planning commission stage, and then things become a lot more heated and a lot more difficult, and it sounds like we might even be putting this off again today. So I guess I just wanted to understand what your effort was. Did you try to reach out to the neighborhood association?
Not until I sent notices for the meeting after the planning hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Carl?
Okay, thank you. I don't know if you can disclose this or not, but can you tell us approximately what kind of terms you get from a lease? Is that protected information?
Yeah, that would be confidential, but there would be a lease, of course.
Well, but you do these with churches routinely, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
What's the consequence to the church of entering a lease like this in terms of their tax exempt status?
It's not affected.
They're making income, and their tax exempt status isn't.
The church in this case had their accountant verify that. That was one of the first things that they wanted to know about before they decided to move forward.
That's interesting, because if they owned property and rented it to someone else, that property then would be on the tax rolls. That's.
I don't know about that, but I know that you'll see, thousands of churches literally that have towers on them.
And the state of Nebraska, you've done those?
We've got some pending right now that we're building in Bellevue, for example, and places of that nature that have had their accountants and attorneys verify that their tax exempt status wouldn't be affected.
Okay, thank you. Need a little better answer, I think.
Other questions? John?
What's the construction cost of this proposed pole that you have?
Ballpark for a monopole design would be anywhere from $150,000 to $250,000.
What do you think it would cost to do that cross?
It's $250.
I don't know. I don't know the cost. I would say at least 2 to 3 times that, and that's a guess, because I'm not in the construction area.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to this item? Okay. All right, next item.
Yeah, I'd like, as I
So
mentioned.
you want somebody else to come up?
Yeah, members from Verizon Wireless are here.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah.
For the site.
Thank you.
Chad Lecker, I'm an RF manager at Verizon Wireless, 1620 M Street in Lincoln. I can come up for any questions that you might have about it from RF point of view. As far as stealth application goes, it does limit technology. You're not able to mount any electronics on the tower. It's one of the limitations at the Roper Park site that's down the hill from here. You have a lot of loss with higher frequencies in the coax than when you get hundreds of feet of run from your equipment in the shelter up to those antennas. It's one of the things we look at when we design this from an RF perspective. The site location, like as he had said, we were given a search ring in the area. No specific land was selected. But as you can tell, it's a lot of residential up there between I-180 and I-80 and Superior.
Questions? All right, thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak?
May I ask, is there anyone here from the church?
I don't think there is anybody here from the church. All right. Teresa, next item.
All right, next would be public hearing ordinances, second reading. Item 26, comp plan conformance 15008, declaring 7 vacant parcels of land generally located at North 15th Street and Claremont Street as surplus.
Good evening, members of the council. I'm Dallas McGee, Assistant Director of the Urban Development Department. Before you this evening is an ordinance that will declare 7 vacant parcels as surplus. These parcels are located on North 14th and 15th Streets in North Bottoms.
Questions? Oh, you still going? Okay,
I
sorry.
can give you a little more background. I did bring a map. The parcels are all vacant. They were acquired by the city about 45 years ago for the Northeast Radial. Once the Antelope Valley Parkway was built, it was determined that they're no longer needed to be used by the city. So we're bringing them to you so that they can be declared surplus and to see if there is a potential user for them. They aren't the kinds of parcels that demand a lot of interest from developers. They do have a lot of limitations. They're all located within the floodplain of Salt Creek. 2 of them are located within the 300-foot radius distance from the railroad. And many of them are just 25 feet in width. So they are challenging. We have, however, had interest in one of the parcels that is wider and it could possibly be built on. So what we want to do is bring them all to you for your consideration to declare them surplus. If you do, we will then advertise and see if there is interest in any or all of these parcels. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
John?
Thank you, Mr. McGee. Any idea what we paid for those decades ago?
You know, I do have some idea. A lot of them had houses on them back in the 1970s. One of them we paid $6,000 for. Let me see if I can. might have. Another one in 1969 we paid $7,000 for. 3 lots we paid $4,500 for in 1972. Another one we paid $1,500 for, looks like in 1970. A long time ago.
Yeah, yes. And out of curiosity, you have an in-house appraiser. Has Mr. Thomas thought anything about or projected what you might get on this one lot?
We haven't at this point. We wanted to go through the process and see if it would be declared surplus. Then we would either ask Mr. Thomas or ask another appraiser to come in and value it and determine if the person that expressed some interest to us is still interested, and then we would sit down and negotiate a sale. Any other questions?
Other questions?
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to these items?
I just have a quick, on that previous, I called the supplier of the bell tower, and it was $150,000 for the bell tower.
I appreciate you coming forward, but we've closed the hearing
Okay.
on that one.
I didn't know
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to this item? Thank you.
Mike Moroz. John, I'll give you a little history on 2 of those lots. Right across the street from me had a duplex on one and a single-family house on the other. Many, many tax dollars were put into those houses to rehab the houses. Furnaces, floors were fixed up. A couple people wanted to buy them after the tenants were moved out of there. And they were very good houses because I was inside them there, took a look at them. And because taxpayer dollars were spent on that, they came in, basically going to tear the houses down. Some of the same people that worked on the houses took the furnaces out, took all the sinks out, took the oak flooring out, took a lot of other things out of there, and then they demolished the house. So there was money being made on both ends of it. And the houses did not need to be torn down. They weren't in that bad shape. They could have been sold and put on the tax rolls, and they were just torn down 2007, right in there, 2008, of the 2 parcels across the street from me. So, I mean, we're spending taxpayer dollars to rehab these houses, and then we come around and we tear these houses down. We don't. When I had a couple friends of mine come in from Michigan that would have liked to bought one of the houses, we went down and they said, well, I'm sorry, it's not for sale. Well, wait a minute here. Could have been on the tax roll since 2007, could have been sold, didn't need to be tore down. So I think, what are we doing here? We're spending this money and then all of a sudden we're tearing it down. The taxpayers didn't get a good fair shake out of this. And now we're going to parcel these together. We're going to sell them next to nothing, because there's nothing on there. Somebody's going to get them. Probably one of the good old boy developers is going to get them and build something on them. So, I mean, I just want to bring you a little bit of history there so that you know what's going on with some taxpayer dollars. So, thank you very much. Any questions?
Questions?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this item? Okay, next item.
Next is item 27, change of zone 15021, application of U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, Victory Park Planned Unit Development for a change of zone from P Public Use to B2 Planned Neighborhood Business District PUD, O3 Office Park District PUD, and R4 Residential District PUD for a planned unit development district designation of said property, and for a development plan which proposes modifications to the zoning ordinance and land subdivision ordinance to allow for a mix of commercial and residential uses on property generally located on the east side of South 70th Street, north of South Wedgwood Drive.
Ed Zimmer from Planning Department. This PUD is the next step in a process I think you've heard quite a lot about. And this is the one that we adjust the zoning on the property from P Public, which has been appropriate because it's been both in public ownership and public use, to a set of zonings that can allow private use while the land ownership will remain public, remain in federal ownership. We assigned a combination of B2, O3, and R4, each for the intended use of specific parts of the property. A lot of the property, while there's 60 acres involved, will remain undeveloped because of the historic nature of the property. Principally the parade ground needs to stay open according to the lease between the prospective developers and the federal government. And the key historic buildings and the key historic vistas on the property remain within this PUD and within the plans you've seen to date. I have the site plan, which I think you also have seen. I can attempt to answer PUD questions if you have them of me, and there are others here as well.
Questions? Carl?
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer. So we got several different zoning configurations here, and one of the key things is to have the residential zoned areas next to the existing residential zoned areas. So that's going to be done?
Yes, and if we want to look at the site plan. The areas of the R4 would be the residential areas, apartments across the back, and turning around the southeast corner. And so those are assigned the R4 zoning. O2 or O3 is what's assigned to the parade ground, which won't be developed, and the property to the south, that will be medical office buildings, and the B2, that's the O3, and the B2 would be the north area where the developers hope they will gain the new VA clinic. Otherwise, it would be other commercial uses, probably medical offices. But each of those areas, and that's what the PUD allows, is some adjustments and then combining zoning for the most appropriate within a large-scale project like this.
And will there be kind of a design sensibility, I guess, to the existing VA facility and buildings there at all?
I think they've mentioned to you the many layers of government involved in this
Yes.
project, from the federal down to us.
Mm-hmm.
And within their historic preservation agreements to operate on this property and to develop on this property, they will be bound by a specific agreement between the federal government, the federal preservation agencies, and the Historical Society and the developers, and those put some quite strict design guidelines in place referencing the existing historic property, as well as the overall site design, which keeps most of that development tucked behind the historic buildings.
Okay, great. Thank you.
John?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Zimmer. Question on the parade grounds, you said that would be O2?
I'm sorry, I should have said O3. I get my 1, 2, and 3 wrong. O3.
Why not leave it public if there's no desire to develop it?
Some of it is used today for parking by the VA, and there would be some continued use of parking in similar areas. There'd be some adjustment to that, but mostly close to the hospital. Some of it would remain in parking, and I think that's probably why it's being assigned the zoning category.
And I don't know if you pointed to the hospital building itself. What will that be zoned?
That's within the B2 area, and the intention there would be a mix of commercial on the lower floor and residential above, and the PUD allows that kind of combining of uses.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name is Kent Seacrest, representing the Seniors Foundation and America First today on this plan unit development. As Ed has indicated, this is a complex project involving multiple governments' approval. This is your third public hearing already, and as you know, we had a pre-council, so we've gone through a lot of details, and we're not going to repeat those details tonight unless you want us to. I have a talented team from our group. Duncan Fallon, who's the site director for the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, is with us. Linda Toomey, who is the VA's housing specialist, is also here for questions. Marianne Stalling, president of Seniors Foundation, and Tammy Ward, the executive director for the Seniors Foundation, is here. And Craig Geese from Sampson Construction Company, all here not to present, but just to be able to answer your questions along the way. We've had an extensive public outreach and dialogue, 3 town halls, many smaller neighborhood backyard, comparing the site, physically looking it over. Again, I want to thank Craig Geese for leading that charge. Lots of phone calls, working with neighbors, and we've addressed what I call the first round and the major round of concerns, and did quite an extensive redesign and relocation of the project. The planning department, after we made all those changes, recommended approval, including the waivers. Planning Commission approved and recommends this project to you on a 7-0 vote. All the conditions have been reached between the developer, city staff, and the Planning Commission, and it's been a balance. Proper balance, I think, to protect the neighborhood interests, the city's general public interests, get land uses that are compatible to maintain and enhance the historic National Register of Historic Places campus, and also create enough flexibility for us to have a development that serves 2 of the most important populations in our community, the seniors as well as the veterans community. We want to thank Ed Zimmer, Steve Hendrickson, Tim C., Win Yermstead in particular, because they've spent the most time in our various meetings working over the plan unit development, and we'd ask for your support, and we'd be glad to answer any of your questions.
Questions? Knocked it out of the park. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to this item?
Mike Morosen, 1500 North 15th. I can speak to a couple issues, being with American Legion and using the senior center services to eat downtown and some of the administrative. It's basically been said the administration of the senior aging partners in that is going to move out to this new area. Well, that does present a problem with a lot of people coming downtown, especially for the services, because all the buses, many of the people that come there ride the buses, so all the buses come down, makes it very convenient. Now, putting it all the way out there, you're going to have people come down, wait for the buses, go out to the center, may not be able to get back for lunch because it's going to take you all that time. You're going to take an hour or 2 just riding the buses, waiting for the buses and that. So it presents a very big problem. So pretty soon you're going to probably be asked to maybe move that aging center out there. And I wanted to, to kind of address the issue that there are going to be problems, Carl, with the downtown issue. That's a big problem going all the way out there for many of the people now that have walkers, that have wheelchairs, that use other devices with canes and that. So you're presenting, a big hardship upon there by moving it out there. It may look on paper very nice moving it out there, but then you get down to the reality of it, there's a big problem. And a number of the seniors asked me to bring that forward and looking at that, and then we're dealing with the issues with the American Legion and that, with the veterans and that, what's going on. So there's a big upheaval going on with that. So, yeah.
Have you heard them discuss maybe having a dedicated bus to transport from the hub downtown right to out there on 70th?
I think that's an issue that would come from you. What are you going to do with the people? Is there going to be a dedicated bus? There are buses that go citywide to bring people down to the senior center and take them home. But then you're talking about a whole group, besides eating downtown, are going to have to go out to the senior center. So that's a big allocation, of 2 different directions that these vehicles are going to be going. We got fuel cost, we got driver's cost, we got insurance costs, so there's a lot of costs that go into there. So that's something I think that you should scrutinize very, very much so with that, because it's going to have to come out of the taxpayer dollars someplace, because, you know, the support down there is getting less and less as more and more people are going out to assisted living centers and that, because I've watched the population diminish, and the younger population is not coming down. So you're losing a lot of that in meal revenue and that, so it does make it tough. But I just wanted to bring that forward with you, so you kind of had a sense of a feeling. You know, I get it because most people know I come down, but I get it right there, you know, at lunchtime almost every day with questions being asked. What are they going to do with this going out there? So there is a worry between a lot of those seniors. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item?
Jane Kinsey with Watchdogs. I just have a question. Has the federal government signed over this property to the city?
We'll have to have somebody else answer this question.
I think basically they're leasing it for 75 years to this development team.
Okay,
City
so the
will not
federal
have any.
government will still own the property, but
Yep.
they're leasing it, and you have that signed that they will do that?
Might be a question for the VA folks here, but
Yeah, we'll get that question answered for you.
What?
We'll get that question answered for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd be curious too if anyone else wanted to testify on this, because I do have some staff questions, and that way I can get those folks up here too.
Let's have him come up, and then we'll bring the staff questions up.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Duncan Fallon. I'm the site manager of the Lincoln VA Veterans Affairs Clinic here in Lincoln. And I think the question was, are we leasing the property to the developer? The answer is yes, we're leasing the property. The VA is not selling it, and we will always own the property.
And has that been consummated or executed?
No, the negotiations between the Veterans Affairs and the Seniors Foundation is still ongoing, and it has not been finalized yet.
I think I misspoke. So the lease will be between the VA and the Seniors Foundation?
Correct.
When do you expect that to be completed?
That is a good answer. Hopefully very soon. A lot of people are waiting for this. We're very much in support of it, and so we're hoping very soon here.
Thank you.
Your staff questions? Or
Well, not for Duncan. I've had some for either Ms. Peterson or Ms. Ward. Or both. While someone was coming up, I was going to ask Ms. Peterson, June, if there's on that transportation question, is there an idea with some of the vans or whatever that the seniors found that you have, would there be an express vehicle from downtown, say, at the bus stops out to the VA campus for the new Seniors Foundation facilities?
Will there be a van dedicated? Is that
Maybe
correct?
she could
identify yourself? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, June's coming forward also to, there's currently a city.
Introduce yourself
I'm
first.
sorry, Tammy Ward, Executive Director of the Seniors Foundation, 600 South 70th Street is where our office is located. June may be able to address that more specifically, Councilman. There is a city bus line that currently exists directly on the campus, which you may know already. So we do have city services for a bus, and I know Councilman Raybould, you mentioned that as well. So as far as a direct van dedicated, I think we would be open to discussing that and putting that in a proposal. And I would defer to Director Peterson for more information on that. Or if you have any more ideas or anything, we're open to talking about it.
I'm June Peterson. I'm the Director of Aging Partners. Currently, we bring people from their homes to centers all across the city. So if someone wanted services at the VA, we would take them there, and we would take them home. We haven't finished discussions about this process, and I'm not comfortable
Okay, no, that's fine.
Thank
Well,
you.
it's an issue then, or a question to look at. Thank you.
But we would we would provide transportation.
I was just thinking maybe Mr. Moroso was suggesting from the downtown bus hub, maybe you do a direct line, or as Ms. Rabel was saying, a express route out there. Something to think about.
Maybe so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Do you have other staff questions, John?
Nope, that was it.
Any other staff questions? All right, we're going to take a 5-minute, well, does anybody else need to testify on this item? All right. We're going to take a 5-minute break before voting. So come back at just a little after, a quarter after.